You are nothing but a cripple holding on to a glorious past that never existed. Carter sneered as he tossed the platinum case into the roaring fireplace. I felt the heat sear my skin, not from the flames, but from the freezing realization that the man standing before me had finally killed the last shred of my mercy. He destroyed the only link to my true identity because he needed the shelf space for his mistress's limited edition alligator skin handbag. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice devoid of the trembling weakness he loved to mock, and said, "You just burned your own lifeline, Carter." The sound of metal clattering against the burning logs was the only answer I got. That case contained the custom-weighted scalpels given to me by the Royal College of Surgeons, tools that had performed miracles in operating theaters from Zurich to Tokyo. Now, they were being treated like garbage in a New York penthouse that I had paid for with my silence. Carter Sterling, the man I had pulled from the wreckage of a Ferrari 3 years ago, stood over me, adjusting his silk tie. He looked like the perfect image of a successful American CEO, tall, impeccably dressed, and completely hollow inside. He did not know that the woman he was calling a cripple was the reason his heart was still beating inside his chest. "Don't look at me with those dead fish eyes, Elena," Carter spat, pouring himself a glass of amber whiskey. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp, irritating rhythm that matched the pounding in my temples. "It is over. The board is announcing the IPO tomorrow. I am the face of Sterling Medical now. I cannot have a wife who shakes like a leaf every time she tries to hold a fork standing next to me. It ruins the brand image." I walked toward the fireplace. The heat was intense, radiating against my shins. I reached in. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Carter shouted, but he did not move to stop me. He never did. I ignored the searing pain biting at my fingertips as I grabbed the hot metal case and pulled it out onto the marble hearth. The smell of singed leather filled the room. My hand, the right hand that he claimed was useless, held the scorching metal steady. There was no trimmer. There had not been a trimmer for 6 months. I had hidden my recovery, waiting for him to show me just 1 ounce of the humanity I thought I saved 3 years ago. I was wrong. The tumor was not in his body. It was his soul. "I stayed because of your grandmother. Carter," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the crackling of the fire. "I promised her on her deathbed that I would not leave until you achieved your dream. You ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange tomorrow. My debt is paid." Carter laughed, a dry, barking sound. He threw a thick envelope onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. "Your debt. You have been living off my money for 3 years. Elena, you are a leech. Sign the papers." Sarah managed to secure the partnership with Mount Sinai Hospital. She is bringing $20 million in revenue to the table. What do you bring medical bills for your physical therapy? The mention of Sarah made the air in the room feel heavy and suffocating. Sarah Miller, his director of marketing, the woman who smiled at me during company dinners while her foot rubbed against my husband's leg under the table. They thought I was blind, or perhaps just too stupid to notice. They did not know that I was the one who anonymously reviewed and approved the Mount Sinai contract protocols 2 weeks ago, without my seal of approval. That deal would be dead in the water. "You are trading a heart surgeon for a marketing manager," I said, picking up the divorce papers. The paper felt cool and crisp against my burned fingertips. "That is a bad trade, Carter, medically speaking." "I am trading a liability for an asset," he countered, checking his diamond-encrusted watch. "And hurry up. Sarah is coming over to celebrate. I want you and your depressing energy out of here before she arrives." I looked at the document. He had highlighted the section on alimony. $0. He was citing the prenuptial agreement we signed 3 years ago. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was protecting his new wealth from me. The irony was delicious. When we signed that prenup, I was already Dr. V, the phantom surgeon of the underworld, with a net worth that dwarfed his family's entire estate. That agreement did not protect him from me. It protected my billions from him, by enforcing it. He was walking away with absolutely nothing of mine. I picked up a pen from the table. Carter watched me closely, his eyes narrowing, waiting for the shake. He wanted to see me struggle. He wanted to see the cripple fail one last time. I let my hand hover over the paper. I allowed a slight, theatrical tremble to ripple through my wrist. Carter smirked. "Here, let me guide your hand. Pathetic." "Do not touch me!" I snapped. The command was sharp, like the snap of a latex glove. Carter recoiled, surprised by the sudden steel in my tone. I signed the paper. Elena Vance. The signature was jagged, ugly, exactly what he expected. I tossed the pen down. "Done. You are free." The elevator doors pinged open with a soft, expensive chime. Sarah walked in, bringing with her a cloud of overpowering floral perfume and the arrogance of a woman who thinks she has won the lottery. She was carrying a bottle of champagne, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor like a countdown. "Oh, is she still here?" Sarah asked, not even looking at me, walking straight to Carter and planting a kiss on his cheek. "I told security to hold the elevator for the trash collection." "She is leaving," Carter said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "And she signed? We are clear." Sarah turned to me, her eyes scanning my simple gray sweater and jeans with utter contempt. "You know, Elena, it is really for the best. Carter needs someone who can stand in the spotlight. You are better suited for the shadows. Maybe you can go back to nursing school. Oh, wait. You need steady hands for that." They both laughed. It was the sound of hyenas circling a lion they thought was dead. I picked up the scorched case of scalpels. It was still hot, but the pain kept me focused. It reminded me that I was alive, and they were merely existing. "You are right, Sarah," I said, walking toward the door. "I do belong in the shadows, but you should pray you never meet me there, because when people meet me in the shadows, it usually means they are dying." "Is that a threat?" Carter called out, stepping forward aggressively. "Get out before I have security throw you out." I did not look back. I walked out of the penthouse, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a final, decisive click. That sound was the severance of the last thread connecting me to the identity of Elena Sterling, the useless housewife. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The building staff, who usually ignored me, looked away, probably sensing the shift in the atmosphere, or maybe they just smelled the smoke on my clothes. I stepped out onto the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. The New York night air was biting and cold, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the apartment. It felt like oxygen rushing into a pair of collapsed lungs. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb silently, gliding like a predator. The rear door opened before the car even came to a complete stop. A man stepped out, Julian Thorne. He was wearing a charcoal trench coat that cost more than Carter's car. His face was a map of sharp angles and dangerous history, marked by a faint scar running through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from the night I saved his life in a bunker in Syria 5 years ago. He held a black umbrella, shielding me from the sudden drizzle that had started to fall. Julian did not look at my clothes. He looked at my hands. He saw the red marks on my fingertips where I had grabbed the hot case. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Who did that?" Julian asked. His voice was a low rumble, deep and terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a man who could level a city block with a phone call. "It does not matter," I said, climbing into the warm leather interior of the car. "The housewife is dead. Julian." Julian closed the door and slid into the seat beside me. He tapped on the partition glass, signaling the driver to move. "And the doctor?" he asked, pouring a glass of mineral water and handing it to me. I opened the scorched platinum case. The scalpels inside were blackened by soot. But the blades were still perfect. Unbroken. Sharp enough to split a human hair. I pulled one out, the metal feeling familiar and powerful in my grip. My hand was as steady as a rock. "The doctor is on call," I replied, staring at the lights of the city blurring past the window. "What is the status of Sterling Medical?" "The short sellers are ready," Julian said, typing something on his tablet. "And I have acquired the majority stake in their rival, Apex Biotech, We are just waiting for your signal." "Not yet," I said, wiping the soot from the blade with my thumb. "Let him ring the bell tomorrow. Let him fly high. The fall is much more lethal from a higher altitude." "Understood." Julian said, "Oh, and there is a patient, Senator Maxwell, a cerebral aneurysm. Mount Sinai refused to operate because the risk is too high. If he dies, it will be a PR disaster for the charity gala tomorrow night the Gala Carter is hosting." A small, cold smile touched my lips. Fate was handing me a scalpel. "Prepare the operating theater." "Julian," I commanded, leaning back into the seat. "It is time to remind New York why they used to call me God." The deafening sound of the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange echoed through the massive flat-screen televisions mounted on the marble walls of the First Sovereign Bank. It was a sound that signaled greed, triumph, and the accumulation of obscenely large fortunes. On the screen, Carter Sterling stood on the balcony overlooking the trading floor, clapping his hands with a predatory grin, while confetti rained down on his impeccably tailored Italian suit. The ticker at the bottom of the screen flashed green. Sterling Medical, up 40%. I pulled my wool coat tighter around my body as I stood in the lobby of the bank's main branch in Manhattan. To the world, and to the man on the screen. I was Elena Sterling, the discarded wife seeking to salvage whatever scraps remained in her personal savings account, to the encrypted servers located 3 floors beneath my feet. I was the holder of the Chimera Trust, an account so heavily shielded that only 3 people in the Western Hemisphere knew it existed. The air in the bank smelled of stale coffee and old money. I walked toward the counter, keeping my head down. My goal was simple. I needed to authorize the transfer of $500 million to Julian's shell company to initiate the hostile takeover of Apex Biotech. It had to be done in person. It had to be done today. "Well, if it isn't the ghost of Christmas past." The voice cut through the hum of the lobby like a serrated knife. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. Sarah Miller had a voice that dripped with faux sweetness and genuine malice. I turned slowly. Carter was standing there, having apparently just arrived from the exchange. He was still wearing the same suit from the television, high on adrenaline and the smell of fresh capital. Sarah clung to his arm, dressed in a white dress that cost more than the average American made in a year. They looked like royalty surveying their subjects. "I thought you would be at home crying into a pillow," Carter said, his voice loud enough to attract the attention of the security guard near the door. "What are you doing here?" Elena trying to cash a welfare check. "I am banking, Carter," I replied, my voice quiet. "Just like you." "Banking?" Sarah laughed, a sharp, grating sound that made several people look up from their phones. "Honey, you don't bank here. This is First Sovereign. The minimum balance fee alone would bankrupt you. Carter, maybe we should give her $5. I think I have some change in my purse." She made a show of digging into her clutch. The humiliation was calculated. They wanted a show. They wanted to prove that even outside the penthouse, I was beneath them. I turned back to the counter, reaching for a deposit slip. This was the moment. If they wanted a cripple, I would give them a cripple. I picked up the pen chained to the desk. I let my hand hover over the paper. Then, I unleashed the tremor. My wrist jerked violently. The pen tapped against the desk in a rapid, chaotic staccato. Tap, 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 tap. I couldn't bring the tip to the paper. It looked pathetic. It looked real. "Look at that!" Carter sneered, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "It is getting worse. You are shaking like a junkie going through withdrawal. How do you even feed yourself? Do you need a nurse to hold your spoon?" "Leave me alone, Carter," I whispered, dropping the pen. It rolled across the marble counter. "I am just concerned for public safety," he said, kicking the pen away with the toe of his polished Oxford shoe. "You might poke someone's eye out. You know, we have a new robotic arm at Sterling Medical that stabilizes tremors. Maybe if you beg, I can get you a discount on the prototype. It is only $200,000. Sarah giggled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You are too generous. Baby, she doesn't need a robotic arm. She needs a straitjacket. The security guard, a large man with a bored expression, finally walked over. He looked at my simple clothes, then at Carter's suit and the platinum watch on his wrist. The calculus of class warfare happened in an instant. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Sterling?" the guard asked, ignoring me completely. "This woman is disturbing the peace," Carter said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. "She is mentally unstable. Look at her. She can't even hold a pen. She is making my fiancé uncomfortable." The guard turned to me, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to step away from the priority counter. The ATM machines are in the vestibule outside." "I have an appointment," I said, my voice steadying slightly, though I kept my hands hidden in my pockets to maintain the illusion. "An appointment?" Carter scoffed. "With who, the janitor?" "With Mr. Henderson," I said. The silence that followed was broken only by Carter's incredulous laughter. "Mr. Henderson, the branch manager Elena. Mr. Henderson manages portfolios for billionaires. He manages my portfolio. He doesn't meet with people who shop at thrift stores." "Ma'am, please leave," the guard said, stepping closer, his bulk looming over me. He reached out to grab my arm. "Do not touch her!" The command did not come from me. It came from the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the lobby. Arthur Henderson, the branch manager of First Sovereign, walked briskly across the floor. He was a man of 60, with silver hair and a suit that whispered old-world power. He looked agitated. He looked terrified. Carter's face lit up. He smoothed his jacket, assuming the manager had come to greet the star of Wall Street. "Arthur," Carter exclaimed, extending his hand. "Good to see you. I was just telling security to handle this riffraff. I didn't want her bothering your VIP clients. We are here to deposit the initial check from the IPO underwriters. $50 million. He said the number loudly, ensuring everyone in the lobby heard it. Mr. Henderson did not take Carter's hand. He did not even look at Carter. He walked straight past the extended hand of the man who thought he owned the world and stopped directly in front of me. The air in the lobby seemed to freeze. Carter's hand was left hanging in empty space, a gesture of rejection so profound it was almost physical. "Mrs. Vance," Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. He bowed his head. It was not a nod. It was a bow. "I apologize for the delay and for the behavior of the staff. We have prepared the vault as you requested." Carter blinked, his brain failing to process the visual data. "Arthur, what are you doing? That is my ex-wife. She is a nobody. She is practically homeless." Henderson finally turned to Carter. His expression was one of icy politeness, the kind reserved for annoying insects. "Mr. Sterling," Henderson said, "this lady is a Diamond Circle client. Her business with this bank takes precedence over everything, including your $50 million deposit, if you wish to deposit your funds. The junior tellers are available at window 4. Please do not obstruct the walkway." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Diamond Circle, that's impossible. That's for people with—" She trailed off. She couldn't even say the number. "Please follow me, Mrs. Vance," Henderson said, gesturing toward the mahogany doors. "We have the documents ready for the Apex acquisition." I looked at Carter. His face was a mask of confusion and rising anger. He looked like a child who had been told Santa Claus was actually a tax collector. "You are making a mistake, Arthur!" Carter hissed. "She is playing you! She is a fraud! Look at her hand! She can't even sign her name!" I pulled my right hand out of my pocket. I held it up. Fingers splayed. I locked eyes with Carter. I held it perfectly still. For 3 seconds. I let him see the absolute stability of the hand he claimed was broken. Then, just as his eyes widened in shock, I let it drop back to my side. "Business calls, Carter," I said coolly. "Try not to spend that $50 million all in one place. You might need it for legal fees." I turned and followed Henderson through the heavy doors as the magnetic lock clicked shut behind us, sealing out the noise of the lobby. I heard Sarah screeching at the guard, demanding to see the manager's supervisor. Inside the private corridor, the air was filtered and silent. Henderson led me into the vault room, a space lined with safety deposit boxes and a single, massive table made of black granite. "I apologize for the scene. Dr. V," Henderson said. Using my code name, he wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Sterling is a persistent." "He is irrelevant," I said, walking to the table. "Do you have the transfer papers?" "Yes." Henderson placed a tablet in front of me. $500 million to Prometheus Ventures. The funds are drawn from your offshore reserves. This will trigger a notification to the SEC, but we have already filed the exemptions under your holding company. I picked up the stylus. My hand was as steady as the granite table beneath it. I signed the authorization. Elena Vance. The signature was a work of art, flowing and sharp. Nothing like the jagged scratch I had given Carter earlier. "Transfer complete," Henderson said as the screen flashed green. "You now own 51% of Apex Biotech." "Good," I said. Apex produces the only neurosurgical drill capable of the procedure I need to perform tonight. Carter's company, Sterling Medical, produces a cheaper knockoff that overheats. He cut corners to boost his profit margins for the IPO. "You are going to operate?" Henderson asked, his eyes widening. "But the rumors, your hand..." "My hand is the only thing standing between Senator Maxwell and a morgue," I said. "And it is the only thing standing between Carter Sterling and a prison cell. Tonight, I am going to save a life, Arthur. And in doing so, I am going to start a war." Henderson nodded, looking at me with a mixture of awe and fear. "Is there anything else, Doctor?" "Yes," I said, checking the time. "Send a bottle of champagne to the lobby for Mr. Sterling." "Champagne?" Henderson asked. Confused. "Yes, tell him it is from the janitor." I walked toward the private exit at the back of the vault. The game had begun. Carter thought he had just deposited a fortune. He didn't realize that I had just bought the ground beneath his feet. And tonight, at the charity gala, I was going to pull it out from under him. The smell of antiseptic was the only thing that could cleanse the stench of Carter's cologne from my memory. I stood in front of the stainless steel sink in the scrub room of the hidden surgical suite Julian had prepared. The water ran hot over my hands, scalding and purifying. I picked up the stiff bristle brush and began the ritual. Scrub, rinse, scrub, rinse. The rhythmic sound of the bristles against my skin was a metronome, counting down the seconds between life and death for Senator Maxwell. Julian stood in the doorway, his reflection distorted in the chrome towel dispenser. He was not wearing his usual suit. He was dressed in surgical scrubs, his face hidden behind a mask, but his eyes were dark with worry. "The senator is prepped," Julian said, his voice low. "But the anesthesiologist is nervous. Maxwell's blood pressure is spiking. If the aneurysm ruptures before you open him up, he is dead on the table." "He won't die," I said, turning off the tap with my elbow. The silence that followed was heavy. "Not today. Today, death has to wait in the lobby." I pushed through the swinging doors into the operating theater. The air inside was freezing, kept at a precise temperature to slow metabolic rates. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor and the mechanical hiss of the ventilator. In the center of the room, under the glare of the overhead lights, lay Senator William Maxwell. He looked small and fragile under the blue drapes, his head shaved and prepped with iodine. The surgical team, a group of elite mercenaries Julian had flown in from Germany, looked up as I entered. They did not know my name. To them, I was just the hired gun, the closer. "Dr. V," the lead nurse said, handing me a sterile gown. "We are ready for the incision." I stepped up to the table. I looked down at the monitor. Heart rate 110. Pressure critical. The aneurysm was a balloon ready to pop inside his skull. "Scalpel," I commanded. The nurse slapped the cold steel into my palm. My fingers closed around it. It wasn't my custom platinum set Carter had burned those, but it would do. I made the incision. A thin red line appeared on the scalp. I moved with the precision of a machine, peeling back the layers of tissue to expose the skull. "Bone drill," I said. The nurse handed me a heavy battery-operated device. It was sleek, white, and branded with a familiar logo, Sterling Medical. I froze. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice cutting through the hum of the room. "It is the standard issue high-speed drill," the nurse replied, confused. "The hospital stocked them last week, top of the line." I gripped the drill. I revved the motor. Whirr! The sound was wrong. It wasn't the smooth, ultrasonic hum of a precision instrument. It was a high-pitched whine, slightly uneven. And then I felt it. A subtle vibration in the handle, a heat building up near the tip after only 3 seconds of activation. "Stop," I said, turning the device off. "Doctor, we are on a clock," the anesthesiologist warned. "Pressure is rising." "This drill is unbalanced," I said, feeling the heat radiate through my latex glove. "The torque is inconsistent. If I use this to cut through the skull, the friction will generate enough heat to cook the duramater. We would cause thermal necrosis before I even see the brain." "But it is brand new," the nurse argued. "It is FDA approved." "It is garbage," I snarled. "Carter cut costs on the cooling mechanism to increase the battery life for the spec sheet. Give me the backup." We only have Sterling drills," the nurse stammered. I looked at the patient. The aneurysm was a time bomb. I didn't have time to order a new set. Then I remembered the package Julian had brought in from the trunk of the Rolls-Royce. "Julian," I barked. "The black case! Open it, now!" Julian, standing in the corner, immediately snapped open the hard-shell case he had retrieved from the Apex Biotech acquisition meeting I had just funded. Inside lay a prototype drill. It was ugly, bulky, and lacked the sleek design of the Sterling model, but it was built by engineers, not marketers. "Sterilize it fast," I ordered. 3 minutes later, the Apex drill was in my hand. I revved it. The sound was a low, steady purr. No vibration, no heat. "This is a tool," I said. I looked at the Sterling drill sitting on the instrument tray. "That is a murder weapon. Bag it. I want it kept as evidence." I turned back to the patient. Drill. The metal bit into the bone. Dust flew. The smell of bone dust filled the air. Acrid and distinct. I worked quickly, removing a section of the skull to reveal the pulsating brain underneath. And there it was, the monster! The aneurysm was massive, a dark, angry swelling on the middle cerebral artery. It was pulsing in time with the beeping monitor, stretched so thin I could almost see the blood rushing through it. One wrong move, one micro tremor, and it would burst. "Microscope," I said. I pulled the optics down over my eyes. The world narrowed to a circle of light. This was the God Zone, the place where the rest of the world disappeared. There was no Carter, no Sarah, no divorce papers. There was only the anatomy and the problem. "Dissector." I took the long, thin instrument. I had to separate the aneurysm from the healthy tissue surrounding it. It was like trying to peel the skin off a grape without breaking the fruit. Only the grape was a bomb and the skin was made of wet tissue paper. "Hand me the clip," I said. My hand moved into the field of vision, under the magnification of the microscope. A natural tremor would look like an earthquake. My hand was perfectly still. I guided the titanium clip around the neck of the aneurysm. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor quickened. "Pressure is spiking again," the anesthesiologist said urgently. 180/110. He is waking up." "Push propofol," I ordered, not looking up. "Do not let him move." "I am maxed out," the voice came back, panic edging in. "He is fighting the sedation." The brain tissue pulsed violently. The aneurysm bulged. It was going to blow. "I need 10 seconds," I whispered. I stopped breathing. I slowed my own heart rate. Syncing my body with the rhythm of the patient, I advanced the clip. The angle was impossible. I had to go in blind, behind the optic nerve, feeling the vessel rather than seeing it. This was the move that made me famous, the Vance maneuver. I felt the metal tip of the applier touch the artery. I felt the resistance of the tissue. Snap! The sound of the clip closing was inaudible to everyone else, but it rang like a gunshot in my ears. I pulled his hand back. Irrigation, I said. Water washed over the site. The aneurysm, once a throbbing threat, immediately began to deflate. The angry red color faded. The clip was holding. Blood pressure stabilizing. The anesthesiologist exhaled. The sound loud in the quiet room. 120/80, sinus rhythm normal. I stepped back from the table, pulling the microscope away. My back was soaked with sweat, but my hands were dry. Close him up, I said to the lead surgeon. Use the standard suturing technique. I do not want anyone to know I was here. I stripped off my gown and gloves, throwing them into the biohazard bin. I picked up the faulty Sterling drill from the tray. It felt heavy, like a brick of guilt. Julian, I said. He stepped forward. Take this to the lab, I said, handing him the drill. I want a full teardown report. I want to know exactly which thermal regulator they removed to save 50 cents. And then I want you to send the report to the FDA anonymously. Consider it done, Julian said, taking the device. You saved him. I did my job, I said, walking toward the door. Now comes the hard part. I went to the recovery room. Senator Maxwell was groggy, the anesthesia still wearing off. I stood by his bedside, watching his chest rise and fall. He was a powerful man, a kingmaker in New York politics, and Carter Sterling was his biggest donor. The senator's eyes fluttered open. He blinked, trying to focus on the ceiling. Then his eyes shifted to me. I was wearing a plain gray hoodie now, my face obscured by the shadows of the room. Water, he croaked. I poured a cup and held the straw to his lips. He drank greedily. Who? He rasped. Who are you? I am the person who threw away the drill that was about to kill you, I said softly. He frowned, confusion clouding his gaze. Dr. Sterling. Carter. He said his team. Carter Sterling gave you the equipment that almost cooked your brain. I cut in. I used an apex drill to fix his mistake. I placed the faulty Sterling drill on the bedside table next to him. It sat there, an ugly, silent accusation. Rest now, Senator, I said. You have a big night tomorrow, the Sterling Gala. You are the guest of honor. Why? He tried to sit up, but was too weak. Why help me? I leaned in close, my gray eyes locked with his. Because I need a voice, I whispered. Carter Sterling thinks he owns this city. Tomorrow night. I need you to show him that he is just a tenant, and his lease is up. I turned to leave. Wait, the senator called out, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. Your name? I paused at the door. Just call me the janitor, I said. I clean up the mess. I walked out into the corridor where Julian was waiting. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. The senator is secure, I told Julian. He knows what happened. Excellent, Julian said. But we have a problem. Carter just released the press statement. He is claiming full credit for the new technology that is saving lives at Mount Sinai. The stock is up another 10% in after-hours trading. Let it rise, I said, checking my phone. A notification popped up. The transfer of ownership for Apex Biotech was finalized. The higher it goes, the harder the impact when it hits the ground. Where to now? Julian asked. Home, I said. I need to find a dress. If I am going to crash a funeral, I should dress the part. Funeral. Julian raised an eyebrow. The funeral of Sterling Medical, I replied. It starts tomorrow at 7 p.m., and I plan to be the one delivering the eulogy. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was vibrating with the hum of manufactured adoration. Camera shutters clicked in a frantic, insect-like rhythm snap, 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 devouring the image of Carter Sterling as he stood on the red carpet. He held a flute of champagne in one hand and Sarah's waist in the other, posing like the king of a new empire through the open doors of the great hall. I could hear his voice amplified by the microphone, booming with the confidence of a man who believed he had cheated fate. This is not just a gala, Carter announced, his voice echoing off the ancient stone walls. This is the dawn of a new era. Sterling Medical is not just saving lives. We are engineering immortality. Applause erupted. It sounded like heavy rain, washing away his sins. I stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, hidden by the shadows of the massive pillars. The silk of my midnight blue gown rustled softly against my skin, a stark contrast to the rough wool I had worn earlier at the bank. Julian had procured the dress from a private showroom in Paris. It was not just clothing, it was armor. "Are you ready?" Julian's voice came through the tiny earpiece hidden in my right ear. He was monitoring the security feed from the control van outside. "Your invitation has just been flagged at the checkpoint. They are sending security." "Let them come," I whispered. "I am not here to attend a party. I am here to crash a coronation." I stepped out of the shadows. My heels struck the marble floor with a deliberate, heavy cadence. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound cut through the murmuring crowd near the entrance. Heads turned. The whispers started like a brush fire, spreading from the back of the room toward the stage. "Who is that? Is that the wife?" I thought she was crippled. I walked straight down the center aisle. The crowd parted, not out of respect, but out of sheer confusion. They were looking for the shaking, broken woman Carter had described in his interviews. Instead, they saw a woman walking with the precision of a predator stalking its prey. Sarah was the first to spot me. She was standing near the chocolate fountain, holding court with a group of investors' wives. Her laughter died in her throat. The crystal glass in her hand tilted dangerously. "You," Sarah hissed, abandoning her group and marching toward me. Her white dress trailed behind her like a bridal train. Ridiculous and excessive. "Security, why is this trash inside the perimeter?" I did not stop walking. "Good evening, Sarah. You are wearing white. Bold choice for someone with such a stained reputation." Sarah's face flushed a deep, ugly red. She stepped into my path, blocking me. We were in the middle of the room now. The cameras had turned away from Carter on the stage and were now pointed directly at us. "You are embarrassing yourself, Elena," Sarah said, her voice dripping with venom. "Did you break into your savings to rent that dress, or did you steal it? Get out before I have you dragged out." "I own stock in this company, Sarah," I replied calmly. "Technically, I paid for the champagne you are drinking, and judging by the smell of your breath, I paid for quite a lot of it." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She shifted the glass of red wine in her hand. It was the oldest trick in the socialite playbook, the accidental spill meant to ruin the rival's dress and force a humiliating exit. I saw the tension in her wrist muscles before she even moved. A surgeon's eye sees everything. She lunged forward, feigning a stumble. "Oh, watch out!" The wine flew through the air, a dark crimson arc aimed straight at my chest. I did not panic. I did not flinch. I simply took one smooth, calculated step to the left. It was the same movement I used to dodge arterial spray in the operating room. Splash! The wine missed me completely. Instead, it landed squarely on the chest of the woman standing directly behind me, the wife of the chairman of the FDA. A gasp went through the room. The chairman's wife shrieked, looking down at her ruined couture gown. "You clumsy idiot!" the woman screamed at Sarah. Sarah froze, her hand still extended, the empty glass trembling. She looked from me to the furious woman, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Oops," I said, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "It seems your aim is as bad as your marketing data. Sarah." You moved," Sarah shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at me. "She moved on purpose." "Enough." Carter's voice roared from the stage. He jumped down, ignoring the stairs, and stormed toward us. His face was a mask of fury. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. "What the hell is this stunt?" Carter snarled, leaning in close so only I could hear. "I told you to disappear. You are ruining my night." "Let go of my arm, Carter," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the same cold authority I used when a junior resident made a mistake during surgery. "Or what?" Carter sneered, tightening his grip. "You will scratch me with your shaky hands. Security, get this woman out of here. She is trespassing and assaulting guests." 2 large security guards started to move toward us. The cameras flashed blindingly. This was it. The public humiliation he wanted. He wanted to drag me out screaming. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." A deep, rasping voice echoed from the main entrance. The sound of a heavy cane striking the marble floor followed. Thud, thud, thud. Everyone froze. Carter looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Who is interrupting me?" Carter shouted. "A satisfied customer," the voice replied. The crowd near the door parted. A wheelchair was pushed forward by a nurse, but the man sitting in it held up a hand. He gripped the arms of the chair and pushed himself up. It was a struggle, but he stood. Senator William Maxwell. The room went silent. Dead silent. Everyone knew the senator had suffered a massive aneurysm yesterday. The news had reported he was in a coma at Mount Sinai. Carter's face went pale. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Senator," Carter stammered, letting go of my arm. We were told you were incapacitated. I am honored you came to celebrate with us." Carter immediately switched into salesman mode. He stepped over the puddle of wine, extending his hand toward the senator. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter shouted to the press, "look, a miracle Senator Maxwell is here. This is the power of modern medicine, the power of Sterling Medical." He was trying to claim credit. He was trying to spin this into a victory. The senator did not take Carter's hand. He leaned heavily on his cane, his eyes burning with a mixture of pain and rage. He shuffled forward until he was standing face to face with Carter. "Modern medicine did save me, Mr. Sterling," the senator said, his voice amplified by the silence of the room. "Yes, exactly," Carter beamed, looking at the cameras. "Our new protocols at Mount Sinai." "But it wasn't your equipment." The senator cut him off. The volume of his voice rose. "And it certainly wasn't your doctor's." The smile slid off Carter's face. "Senator, I don't understand." Senator Maxwell reached into the pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was the faulty Sterling drill I had given Julian. The drill bit was visibly warped from the heat. "Do you recognize this?" "Son," the senator asked, holding the bag up to the light. "My surgeons tell me this device nearly cooked my brain inside my skull." Murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. The flashbulbs went crazy. That is impossible," Carter stuttered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "That is a prototype. It must be a mistake." "The only mistake," the senator said, turning slowly to look at me, "was trusting a man who cares more about his stock price than human life." Carter followed the senator's gaze. He looked at me. I stood there, untouched, calm, watching his world begin to crack. "Elena," Carter whispered, the realization slowly dawning on him. "What did you do?" I stepped forward, my heels clicking on the marble. I took the evidence bag from the senator's hand. "I fixed it, Carter," I said, my voice clear and cold. "Just like I fixed everything else you broke." I turned to the press, looking directly into the lens of the nearest camera. "My name is Elena Vance," I announced. "I am the new majority shareholder of Apex Biotech, and I am here to announce a recall of every single Sterling medical device currently in use." Carter lunged at me. "You lie! You are a nobody!" But before he could touch me, the senator raised his cane and slammed it down onto the floor, blocking Carter's path. "Touch her," the senator growled, "and I will have the Secret Service break every bone in your hand." Carter froze. Sarah let out a sob from behind him. The music had stopped. The applause had died. The funeral had begun. The sound of $1 billion empire collapsing was not an explosion. It was a digital ripple. It started with a single phone chirping in the back of the room, then another, then a dozen. Within 10 seconds, the Great Hall of the Metropolitan Museum was filled with the discordant symphony of notification alerts. Every investor, banker, and journalist in the room was looking at their screens. The light from hundreds of smartphones illuminated their faces, turning them into pale, ghostly masks of panic. "Down 12%, a voice whispered near the buffet table. "Trading halted," Someone else muttered, dropping their fork. The SEC just froze Sterling Medical. Carter Sterling stood frozen on the marble floor. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the heat of the spotlights. He looked at the sea of people who, just moments ago, were applauding him. Now, they were frantically typing sell orders, trying to salvage their portfolios before his company hit zero. "This is a mistake!" Carter shouted, his voice cracking. He turned to the cameras, waving his arms desperately. "Cut the feed, cut the damn feed. This is corporate sabotage. That woman is lying." He pointed a shaking finger at me. I stood perfectly still next to Senator Maxwell, watching the chaos unfold with the detached interest of a surgeon watching a heart stop beating. "You can't buy Apex," Carter snarled, stepping around the senator's cane to get closer to me. His eyes were bloodshot, wild. "You are penniless. I saw your bank statements during the divorce. You had nothing. Who is backing you? Who gave you the loan? Is it Julian? Is he your sugar daddy?" "I don't have a sugar daddy, Carter," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the panicked crowd. "And I don't take loans. I grant them—" "Liar!" Sarah screamed, pushing past a waiter. She grabbed Carter's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "She is bluffing. Carter, she was wearing rags this morning. She is trying to scare off the investors." Carter seemed to latch onto this idea like a drowning man grabbing a piece of driftwood. He straightened up, fixing his tie with a jerky manic motion. "That is right." Carter laughed, though the sound was closer to a sob. "You are bluffing. You can't afford a hostile takeover. $500 million. You don't even have $500. I made sure of it. I cut off your credit cards this morning." I looked at him with genuine pity. He really believed that his petty allowance was the source of my survival. He had no idea that while he was playing with millions, I was moving billions in the dark markets of global healthcare. "You really didn't read the prenup, did you?" I asked softly. "I wrote the prenup," Carter yelled. "What goes in is yours. What is made during the marriage is ours, unless specified. You came in with nothing." "I came in with the Chimera Trust," I said. The name hit the room like a physical blow. A hush fell over the bankers in the front row. They knew that name. Everyone on Wall Street knew that name. The Chimera Trust was the invisible hand behind half the medical patents in Europe. It was a ghost fund, rumored to be owned by Saudi royalty or a reclusive tech genius. Chimera. Carter blinked, his brain struggling to process the information. That is a hedge fund myth. It owns the patent for the artificial heart valve. It owns the— He stopped. His eyes went wide. He looked at my hands, the hands that had saved thousands of lives, the hands that had invented the very techniques his company tried to replicate and failed. "I am Chimera," I said. "And the $500 million I used to buy your competitor today, that wasn't my capital." "Carter, that was just the interest I earned in the last quarter from the patents you have been infringing on for 3 years." Carter staggered back as if I had slapped him. He hit the edge of a table, knocking over a tower of champagne glasses. The sound of shattering crystal crash, tinkle, shatter punctuated the revelation. "You," he gasped, "you were sitting on a fortune. While I was stressing about profit margins, you watched me struggle." "I watched you cheat." I corrected him cold. "I watched you cut corners. I watched you put cheap thermal regulators in brain drills to save a few pennies. I didn't hide my money to hurt you. Carter, I hid it because I knew the moment you saw it, you would try to steal it, and I was right." Sarah let out a low moan. She looked at Carter, then at me. The calculation in her eyes was visible. She realized she had just bet on the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. "I didn't know," Sarah cried out, stepping away from Carter. She looked at the cameras, tears streaming down her face. "He told me the equipment was safe. I am just the marketing director. I just sold what he gave me. I am a victim here too." "Shut up, Sarah," Carter roared, turning on her. "You signed the safety reports, you forged the clinical trial data." "Because you told me to," Sarah shrieked back. The cannibalism had begun. They were eating each other alive to survive. Ladies and gentlemen! A loud, amplified voice boomed from the entrance. The heavy oak doors of the museum swung open, but it wasn't more guests. 12 men in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 yellow letters marched in. FBI. Behind them were officers from the NYPD. The lead agent, a man with a buzz cut and a face like carved granite, walked straight toward us. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at the champagne. He looked at Carter. "Carter Sterling," the agent asked. "This is a misunderstanding," Carter stammered, holding up his hands. "My wife. Ex-wife. She is confused. This is a domestic dispute." "We are not here for a domestic dispute," the agent said, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. The ratcheting sound of the metal was loud and final. "We are here for the attempted assassination of a United States senator using a non-FDA-approved medical device." Assassination. Carter turned pale. No, it was a malfunction, a product defect. "Selling a device you know is lethal to a government official is not a defect, son," Senator Maxwell said, leaning on his cane. "It is an act of terror." The agent spun Carter around. He slammed Carter's chest against the table, sending more glass crashing to the floor. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent recited, snapping the cuffs onto Carter's wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Sarah!" Carter screamed as they hauled him up. "Call the lawyers! Call the firm!" But Sarah was already backing away, vanishing into the crowd. She had dropped her clutch. She was running toward the exit, her white dress fluttering like a flag of surrender. "Grab her too," the agent ordered his team. "She is listed as a co-conspirator on the warrant." 2 officers sprinted after Sarah. Her screams echoed through the hall as they intercepted her near the coat check. I watched them drag Carter away as he passed me. He looked up. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and begging. "Elena," he rasped. "Help me! You are a doctor! You save people! Save me!" I looked at him. I felt nothing. No joy. No sadness. Just the clinical satisfaction of removing a tumor. "I am a doctor." "Carter," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but he heard it. "But I only treat humans. I don't treat parasites." The agents pushed him forward. The cameras flashed blindingly, capturing the image that would be on the front page of every newspaper tomorrow, the golden boy of Wall Street in cuffs, ruined by his own greed. The room was still chaotic, but a circle of silence had formed around me. The investors who had sneered at me earlier were now looking at me with fear and reverence. They realized that the janitor was the one holding the keys to the entire industry. "Are you all right, my dear?" Senator Maxwell asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I am fine, Senator," I said, turning away from the exit where Carter had disappeared. "The surgery was successful. The infection has been removed." "What will you do now?" he asked. "Sterling Medical will be liquidated. The market is wide open." Now, I adjusted the strap of my dress. Now I go to work. I have a company to rebuild, and I believe Apex Biotech has a lot of cleaning up to do. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I passed the spot where Sarah had spilled the wine. The red stain on the floor looked like blood. I stepped over it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was crisp and clean. Julian was waiting by the Rolls-Royce, holding the door open. He looked at the chaos inside the museum, then at me. "Did they cry?" Julian asked as I slid into the back seat. "They screamed," I replied, leaning back against the leather headrest. "Drive. Julian, we have an early meeting tomorrow." "Where to?" "To the Apex headquarters," I said, watching the lights of the police cars flash in the rearview mirror. "I want to see what $500 million bought me." As the car pulled away, I closed my eyes. The trimmer was gone. The housewife was gone. Dr. V was back, and New York City was about to learn that the hand that heals is also the hand that rules. The tires of the Rolls-Royce hissed against the wet asphalt as we pulled up to the glass monolith that was the headquarters of Apex Biotech. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. The building should have been dark, a sleeping giant of the medical industry. Instead, the top floor was ablaze with light. "The vultures are feasting," Julian said, looking up at the penthouse boardroom. "They heard the news about Carter. They think the market vacuum belongs to them." "They are mistaken," I said. Stepping out of the car, the rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of ozone and wet concrete. My midnight blue gown was still damp at the hem, dragging slightly on the pavement, but I did not care. I threw Julian's heavy trench coat over my shoulders. It looked less like a coat and more like a cape. We walked past the security desk in the lobby. The night guard, a young man half asleep, jumped to his feet as he saw Julian's face. He didn't ask for ID. He just pressed the button to open the turnstile. Fear is a universal passkey. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was silent. I watched the numbers climb, with every floor. The housewife Elena died a little more, and the CEO, Elena, took her first breaths. Ding! The doors slid open. The hallway was lined with modern art and smelled of expensive leather and arrogance. We could hear voices coming from the double-glass doors at the end of the corridor. Loud, boisterous voices. I signaled Julian to wait. I wanted to hear what my new employees really thought of the situation. "Best thing that could have happened," a gravelly voice shouted. "That was Richard Graves, the CEO of Apex. Sterling is in handcuffs. The SEC has frozen their assets. By Monday morning, we will have poached half their clients." "But what about the acquisition?" another voice asked, nervous and thin. "Prometheus Ventures. The transfer went through an hour ago. We have a new owner. Richard, someone named Chimera." "Chimera is a ghost, you idiot," Graves scoffed. I could hear the clink of a crystal decanter hitting a glass. "It is probably some Saudi oil fund or a tech brat from Silicon Valley looking for a tax write-off. They don't know the medical industry. They will let us run the show as long as the graphs are green. We will double our bonuses this quarter and bleed the R&D budget dry before they even figure out where the bathroom is." "Bleed the R&D budget," I whispered to myself. Interesting strategy. I nodded to Julian. He pushed the heavy glass doors open. They swung inward with a heavy whoosh. 6 men sat around a table made of frosted glass. They were all white, all over 50, and all frozen in the act of toasting their own greed. Richard Graves sat at the head of the table, his feet resting on the surface, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked up, his eyes scanning my evening gown, then Julian's menacing frame. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just a woman in a party dress. "Who the hell are you?" Graves barked, dropping his feet to the floor. "This is a closed meeting, security. How did a stripper get in here?" "I am not a stripper, Mr. Graves," I said, walking calmly toward the head of the table. "Though I am about to strip you of your title." Graves stood up, his face turning purple. "Get out, now, before I have you arrested for trespassing." "You might want to check your email." "Richard," I said, pulling a sleek black chair out from the side of the table. I didn't sit. I just rested my hand on the back of it. My hand was steady. "The notification from the board regarding the change of ownership should have arrived 3 minutes ago." The nervous man at the end of the table's CFO, Thomas Klein, fumbled with his tablet. His face went pale. "Richard," Klein whispered. It is here. Prometheus Ventures has appointed a new chairperson. Effective immediately." "So what?" Graves snarled. "Who is it? Some lawyer?" "It is Elena Vance," Klein read, his voice trembling. He looked up at me, his eyes widening in recognition. "Wait, that is Carter Sterling's wife, the invalid." "Ex-wife," I corrected, my voice slicing through the room like a cold wind. "And as for invalid..." I reached out and picked up the bottle of scotch Graves had been drinking from. It was a 30-year-old single malt, heavy. I held it by the neck with 2 fingers. I poured the amber liquid onto the carpet, holding the bottle perfectly still as it emptied. "Glug, glug, glug." "That seems like a waste of company assets, Mr. Sir Graves," I said, placing the empty bottle down with a soft thud. "Much like your salary." Graves stared at the bottle, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The ghost fund wasn't a distant investor. It was the woman standing in front of him. You, Graves stammered, trying to regain his composure. You bought us with what money Carter said you were destitute. Carter is currently in a federal holding cell because he underestimated me. I said, I suggest you do not make the same mistake. I walked to the head of the table. Graves was still standing there. I looked at him. I didn't say a word. I just waited. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was a test of dominance. Graves broke. He swallowed hard, picked up his glass, and stepped aside. I sat down. The leather chair creaked softly as I leaned back, surveying the board. Now, I said, clasping my hands on the table, let's discuss this plan to bleed the R&D budget. Apex Biotech produces the finest neurodrills in the world, but your profit margins are down 15%. Why? It is the market, Graves lied, sweating now. Raw material costs, regulation. Wrong, I said. It is because you are siphoning funds into Project Icarus, a failed stem cell initiative that has zero clinical viability but happens to be run by your brother-in-law's consulting firm. The room gasped. Klein dropped his tablet. How do you know about Icarus? Graves whispered. That is a black project. It is off the books. I own the books now, Richard, I said. I own the ink, the paper, and the lies you wrote on them. Julian. Julian stepped forward and tossed a file onto the table. It slid across the glass and stopped right in front of Graves. Photos, bank transfers, embezzlement records. This is illegal, Graves sputtered. You hacked our servers? I audited my property, I replied, and I found a rat infestation. I stood up again. The meeting was over. Richard Graves, you are fired for cause embezzlement, corporate malfeasance, and stupidity. You have 5 minutes to clear your desk. If you take so much as a stapler, Julian will hand this file to the district attorney. Graves looked around the room for support. The other board members looked down at their hands, terrified. They knew a predator when they saw one. You can't do this, Graves hissed, grabbing his jacket. The board won't support you. I built this company. You built a house of cards, I said. I am building a fortress. Get out. Graves stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard it vibrated. The sound echoed in the silence he left behind. I turned my gaze to the remaining 5 men. Gentlemen, I said softly. Mr. Klein, you are now the acting CEO. Your first task is to shut down Project Icarus and redirect all funding to the Neuro Division. We have a recall to capitalize on. Yes, Ms. Vance, Klein stammered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Anything else? Yes, I said, walking toward the window that overlooked the city. The rain was starting again, blurring the lights of New York. Get me the file on the Chimera Protocol, the real one. Klein froze. The other board members exchanged terrified glances. The Chimera Protocol, Klein asked, his voice barely audible. But, Ms. Vance, that file was sealed by the founder 10 years ago. It is not safe. I turned back to face them. The reflection of the city lights in the window made it look like I was standing in fire. I didn't buy this company for the drills. Mr. Klein, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I bought it for the secret you have been hiding in the basement. Open the file. Tomorrow morning, we change the world. The thunder rolled outside, shaking the glass. The elevator descended past the lobby, past the parking garage, and into the earth. The numbers on the digital display turned from white to an ominous red as we hit sub-basement 3. The air pressure in the small metal box shifted, popping in my ears. Beside me, Thomas Klein was sweating so profusely that I could smell his fear. It smelled like sour milk and desperation. Ms. Vance, Klein whispered, his hands wringing together. You do not understand. No one goes down here, not even the cleaning crew. Mr. Graves installed a separate ventilation system just so no one would ask why the electricity bill was so high. Silence, I commanded. My voice was calm, but inside, My mind was racing. The file Klein had shown me upstairs was thin. Too thin. It contained only shipping manifests for high-grade medical narcotics and life support equipment. Enough equipment to keep a small army alive, or one very important person. The elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors slid open with a heavy, hydraulic hiss. We stepped out into a corridor that looked nothing like the corporate luxury above. The walls were bare concrete, cold and damp. The lighting was industrial fluorescent, buzzing with a headache-inducing flicker. At the end of the hall stood a single door made of reinforced steel, lacking any handle. "It is a biometric airlock," Klein said. Stopping 10 feet away, he pointed to the scanner on the wall. "It requires a retinal scan and a voice print from Richard Graves. There is no override. If you try to force it, the room vents halon gas. Anything inside dies in 30 seconds. Julian stepped forward. He inspected the frame of the door, his eyes scanning for weakness. He pulled a small device from his pocket, something that looked like a black smartphone but was much heavier. "I can blow the hinges," Julian said, his voice flat. "But if there is gas, we risk killing whatever is inside." "We are not blowing anything up," I said, walking to the keypad, "and we do not need Graves' eyes." I looked at the scanner. It was a Sterling Medical Model 4 security interface. I recognized it because I had written the original critique of its security flaws in a medical journal 5 years ago under a pseudonym. Carter had ignored the article to save money on the patch. "This scanner measures retinal patterns," I said, pulling a penlight from my pocket. "But to save processing power, it only scans the vascular map of the left eye, and it has a failsafe for emergency medical access." "Emergency access?" Klein asked. "If the system detects a cardiac arrest in the user, it unlocks to allow paramedics in," I explained. "It is a liability feature." I turned to Julian. "I need you to stop my heart." Klein gasped, backing away until he hit the concrete wall. You are insane!" Julian looked at me. He didn't blink. He didn't argue. He knew exactly what I was asking. He knew the vagus nerve strike. It was a technique we had discussed in theory. A precise blow to the carotid sinus could cause temporary cardiac pause. "You have 10 seconds before brain damage begins," Julian warned. His hand hovered in the air. "Do it," I ordered. Julian struck. His hand was a blur. I felt a sharp, electric shock on the side of my neck. The world instantly went gray. My knees buckled. I felt my chest go hollow as the rhythm of my life stopped. Thump! I hit the floor. Julian immediately grabbed my wrist, jamming it against the pulse sensor on the door panel while holding my eyelid open for the scanner. The machine beeped. "Error. Cardiac arrest detected. Emergency protocol engaged." The heavy steel bolts of the door retracted with a loud clank. The door hissed open. Julian immediately struck my chest, a hard percussive thump right over the sternum. Air rushed back into my lungs. My heart restarted with a painful, galloping rhythm. I coughed, gasping for oxygen, the concrete floor cold against my cheek. 30 seconds, Julian said, helping me stand. "You were out for 4. "Effective," I wheezed, straightening my dress. I looked at Klein. He was staring at me as if I were a demon rising from hell. "Stay here, Klein. If you run, Julian will find you." I walked through the open door. The room beyond was not a lab. It was an intensive care unit. The air was freezing. Monitors lined the walls, casting a rhythmic green glow over the space. In the center of the room, surrounded by tubes and wires, lay a single hospital bed. I walked closer. The sound of the ventilator was the only noise. Hiss, click, hiss, click. The figure in the bed was male, emaciated. His skin was pale and waxy, the result of years without sunlight. A feeding tube ran into his nose. I picked up the chart hanging at the foot of the bed. Patient 0. Admission date October 15th, 3 years ago. My hand froze. October 15th, the date of the car accident, the date Carter was injured and I saved him. I looked at the patient's face, beneath the overgrown beard and the hollow cheeks. The bone structure was familiar, terrifyingly familiar. I reached out and brushed the hair away from his forehead. There was a scar there, a scar I had seen in family photos. It wasn't a stranger. "My God," I whispered. It was Lucas Sterling, Carter's older brother, the brilliant, kind-hearted heir to the Sterling Empire who had supposedly died in a skiing accident in Aspen 3 years ago. His death was the only reason Carter had inherited the CEO position. Lucas wasn't dead. He was here, kept in a medically induced coma. I looked at the IV bag dripping into his arm. I recognized the label, pentobarbital, a sedative. They were keeping him asleep. They were farming him for something. I scanned the other monitors, bone marrow extraction logs, weekly dates. "They are using him," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt before. Carter had a genetic blood disorder. He needed a bone marrow match to survive. He didn't just steal the company from his brother. He turned his brother into a living blood bag. Julian stepped up beside me. He looked down at the man in the bed. "He is the rightful owner of everything," Julian said. "If he wakes up, Carter goes to prison for life. Kidnapping, torture, fraud." "He is going to wake up," I said, reaching for the IV line. I clamped the tube. I pulled the needle from Lucas's arm. "Ms. Vance!" Klein shouted from the doorway. "You can't! Graves said if he wakes up, the shock will kill him." "Graves is a liar," I said, checking Lucas's vitals. "His brain activity is suppressed, but stable. He needs to be weaned off the drugs, but he is strong." I looked at Lucas's sleeping face. This was the ultimate weapon. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a nuclear bomb. "Julian," I commanded, "call the private ambulance, the armored one. We are moving him to my private clinic." "What about the police?" Julian asked. "No police?" I said. "Not yet. If the police know he is alive, Carter's lawyers will find out. They will try to finish the job before he can testify. Lucas stays dead until I say he is alive." I placed my hand on Lucas's cold forehead. "Sleep well, brother-in-law," I whispered. "Your watch has ended. Mine has just begun." 5 miles away, in a parked limousine watching the Apex building from the shadows, a phone rang. Richard Graves sat in the back seat, holding a glass of scotch with a trembling hand. He picked up the phone. "She is inside," Graves said, his voice thick with fear. A voice on the other end answered. It was distorted, digital, unrecognizable, but the authority in the tone was unmistakable. It was the voice of someone who viewed human lives as lines on a spreadsheet. "Did she find the asset?" the voice asked. "Yes," Graves replied. "She bypassed the biolock. She has the brother." There was a long silence on the line. Rain drummed against the roof of the limousine. "This is unfortunate," the voice said. "Carter was a useful idiot, but he was sloppy. We cannot allow the Chimera Protocol to be exposed. It links back to the senator's funding." What do I do?" Graves asked. "She fired me. I have no access." "You are no longer required, Richard," the voice said. "Go home. Enjoy your severance." "Wait," Graves said, sensing the shift in tone. "You are going to help me. Right, I kept the secret for 3 years." "The secret is out," the voice said, "and loose ends must be tied." Click. The line went dead. Graves lowered the phone. He looked out the window. A black motorcycle pulled up alongside his limousine. The rider wore a black helmet with a tinted visor. Graves saw the rider raise a gloved hand. He saw the suppressed pistol. He didn't even have time to scream. "Foot! Foot!" 2 cracks appeared in the bulletproof glass. They spiderwebbed, but held. Graves scrambled to the other side of the car, screaming at his driver. "Go drive, they are trying to kill me." The limousine screeched away from the curb, tires smoking. Back in the basement, I watched the ambulance crew load Lucas onto the stretcher. I didn't know that outside. The war had just escalated from corporate maneuvering to assassination. "We have the package," Julian said, securing the back doors of the ambulance. "Good," I said, climbing into the passenger seat. "Let's go. Carter Sterling thinks he is in hell right now in that jail cell. But when I am done with him, he is going to wish he had stayed there." The Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan smelled of industrial bleach, unwashed bodies, and despair. It was a scent that clung to the back of your throat, a stark contrast to the lavender and sandalwood perfume I had applied before leaving the penthouse. I sat on the cold steel stool in the private visitation room, my hands folded calmly on the scratched plexiglass table. I was wearing a black tailored suit, sharp enough to cut glass, and oversized sunglasses that hid the lack of sleep in my eyes. The heavy steel door on the other side of the room buzzed loudly. Psst! Carter Sterling was shoved into the room by a guard twice his size. He was not wearing his Italian silk suit anymore. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was a greasy mess. His eyes were wild, darting around the room as if searching for an exit that did not exist. He looked like a king who had been dragged through the gutter. He sat down, the chains on his wrists rattling against the table. Clink, clink. "Elena!" he gasped, leaning forward. His breath smelled of stale coffee and vomit. Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. The conditions, they are animals in here. A man tried to stab me with a toothbrush this morning because I wouldn't give him my fruit cup. I did not move. I did not take off my sunglasses. "Hello, Carter," I said, my voice flat. "I see orange is the new black for you. It clashes with your complexion." "Stop it," Carter hissed, slamming his cuffed hands on the table. The guard in the corner took a step forward, hand on his baton, but I raised a hand to stop him. "This isn't funny. You had your fun, you humiliated me, you crashed the stock. Fine, you win. Now use that chimera money and post my bail. The judge set it at $10 million. That is pocket change for you now. Right." $10 million, I repeated slowly. "Yes, I could pay that. I could write a check right now and have you out in an hour." Carter's eyes lit up with hope. It was pathetic. He still thought this was a game. He still thought we were playing by the rules of a marriage spat. Yes, do it," Carter begged. "I will sign whatever you want. I will give you the penthouse. I will give you the Hampton house. Just get me out. I can't breathe in here." "I am not here to bail you out, Carter," I said, leaning forward and lowering my sunglasses just enough for him to see the ice in my gray eyes. "I am here to ask you about the harvest." Carter froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he had been slapped. "The what?" he stammered, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The harvest," I said clearly. "Project Icarus, Sub-Basement 3 at Apex Biotech. I was there last night. Carter, I saw the empty bed." I lied about the bed being empty. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to sweat. Carter began to shake. It wasn't the fake tremor he had mocked me for. It was genuine. Primal terror. He looked at the camera in the corner of the room, then back at me. You went into the basement," he choked out. Did you see him?" "I saw everything," I said. "I saw the dialysis machines. I saw the bone marrow extraction logs. You have a very rare blood disorder, don't you? Carter aplastic anemia. You needed a donor, but not just any donor, a perfect genetic match." "Stop," Carter pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. "Please, Elena, don't say it." "You told the world your brother died in a skiing accident," I continued, relentless. "Lucas Sterling, the rightful heir, the better man, but you didn't bury him. Did you? You buried him in a concrete tomb and kept him alive just enough to drain him dry whenever your sick body needed a recharge." "I had to," Carter sobbed, his face crumbling. "I was dying. The company needed a leader, Lucas. Lucas was too soft. He wanted to give away the patents. He would have ruined us." "So you turned him into a biological battery?" I asked, disgusted. "You are not a CEO. Carter, you are a vampire." "It wasn't my idea," Carter blurted out. The room went silent. I sat back. This was it, the crack in the armor. "What did you say?" I asked softly. Carter looked around, terrified. He lowered his voice to a frantic whisper. I I wanted to let him go. After the accident, I wanted to call the ambulance, but they stopped me. They said he was more useful this way. They set up the lab. They hired Graves. I just signed the checks. Who are they, Carter? I demanded. Who is powerful enough to make a billionaire kidnap his own brother? Carter shook his head violently. I can't, if I say the name. I am dead. You don't understand. Elena, you think you are playing in the big leagues because you have money? These people, they own the money. They own the senator. They own the judges. They don't own me, I said. Give me a name, and maybe I let you live. No, Carter screamed, suddenly standing up. Get out! I want my lawyer. I am not saying anything else. The guard moved in, grabbing Carter by the shoulder. Carter thrashed, panic taking over. You have to hide. Elena, Carter yelled as they dragged him toward the door. If you found the basement, they know they are coming for you. Run while you can. The door slammed shut. Boom! I sat alone in the silence of the visitation room. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from clarity. Carter was a puppet. A cruel, sadistic puppet. But a puppet nonetheless. There was a hand controlling the strings, a hand that reached higher than I had anticipated. I stood up and walked out of the prison. The rain outside was heavy now, a torrential downpour that turned the New York streets into rivers of gray sludge. I walked toward the waiting Rolls-Royce, Julian holding the umbrella open. He cracked, I said as I reached the car. But he didn't break. He claims someone else orchestrated the kidnapping, a higher power. Did he give a name? Julian asked, opening the door. No, I said, but he was terrified, whoever it is. They scare him more than life in prison. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. This is Vance. Don't hang up. A voice rasped on the other end. It was breathless, distorted by wind and the sound of traffic. And for God's sake, don't track this call. I recognized the voice immediately. It was the gravelly, arrogant tone of Richard Graves, the man I had fired 12 hours ago, but the arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. Mr. Graves, I said coolly, I assume you are calling to return the stapler you stole. They tried to kill me, Graves screamed into the phone. A biker, 2 shots through the window. I am bleeding. Elena, I took a piece of glass in the shoulder. Why are you calling me? I asked, signaling Julian to trace the call despite the warning. Because you are the only one crazy enough to fight them. Graves wheezed. Carter won't talk. He is a coward. But I kept the records. I have the ledger. Elena, the real ledger, not just the money, the names, the patron list. Where are you? I asked. I need protection. Graves said. I need extraction. Get me out of the country, and I give you the head of the snake. Name the place, I said. The old meatpacking plant on the west side, Graves said. Pier 54. Come alone. If I see Julian or the cops, I burn the ledger and I disappear. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. Elena, Graves added, his voice trembling. Bring a gun. You are going to need it. Click. I lowered the phone. I looked at Julian. Graves is at Pier 54, I said. He has the list of the people behind Carter. It is a trap, Julian said immediately. The patron just tried to kill him. Now he wants to meet you. He could be using you as a bargaining chip to buy his life back. Maybe, I said, reaching into the glove compartment of the Rolls-Royce. I pulled out a sleek, compact Glock 19. I checked the chamber. It was loaded. But if there is even a 1% chance he has that list, I have to take it. I am coming with you, Julian said. He said come alone, I replied, tucking the gun into my coat pocket. Drop me a block away. Keep the sniper rifle ready. If anyone other than Graves moves, put them down. Understood, Julian said, shifting the car into gear. Welcome to the war, Doctor. The car tore off into the rainy night. The boardroom battles were over. The street war had begun. Pier 54 smelled like the ocean had vomited up a century of industrial waste. The rain was coming down in sheets. a relentless, freezing curtain that blurred the lights of the Jersey skyline across the Hudson River. I stepped out of the shadows of the alley, my heels sinking into the mud. I had traded my heels for tactical boots Julian kept in the trunk, but I was still wearing the ruined gala dress under my trench coat. It felt heavy, weighed down by water and the impending violence. "I have eyes on the perimeter," Julian's voice crackled in my earpiece. He was perched on top of a shipping container 200 yards away, looking through the scope of a long-range rifle. "Thermal is picking up one heat signature inside the main warehouse. It is erratic. It must be Graves." "Any sign of the tail?" I whispered, gripping the cold metal of the Glock in my pocket. "Negative," Julian replied. "But in this weather, a ghost could walk right past me. Keep your head down. Elena, 2 minutes. Get the package and get out." I moved toward the warehouse. The rusted corrugated metal doors were slightly ajar, creaking rhythmically in the wind. Screech, thud, screech, thud. It sounded like the building was breathing. I slipped inside. The noise of the storm was instantly muffled, replaced by the dripping of water from the leaky roof. The vast space was filled with rotting wooden crates and abandoned machinery. "Graves," I called out softly. "It is Vance." A shadow detached itself from behind a forklift. Richard Graves stumbled into the dim light. He looked less like a CEO and more like a cornered rat. His expensive suit was torn and stained with dark fluid. He was clutching his left shoulder, his face pale and slick with sweat. "You came," Graves wheezed, his eyes darting around the empty space. "Did you bring it? A boat? A helicopter?" "I brought a car," I said, keeping my distance. I kept my hand on the gun. "The car leaves when I have the list." Graves laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. He limped closer. "You are cold, Elena, just like Carter. Maybe that is why you two worked." "I am nothing like Carter," I said. "Carter sells people. I fix them. Now give me the drive." Graves reached into his jacket with his good hand. He pulled out a small, silver flash drive. It hung from a lanyard around his neck. "This is it," Graves whispered, holding it up. "The patron list, the bribery accounts, the blackmail on the judges, and the connection to Project Icarus. It is all here, encrypted, but I have the key in my head." "Give it to me," I ordered, extending my hand. Graves hesitated. He looked at the drive, then at me. "If I give this to you, I have no leverage. How do I know you won't leave me here?" "Because I am a doctor," I said, stepping closer. "And you are bleeding out. That shoulder needs sutures. Richard, the axillary artery is close. If you don't get in my car in 5 minutes, you won't need an assassin. You will die of hypovolemic shock." Graves shuddered. He looked at his shoulder, then nodded. He stepped forward, reaching out to drop the drive into my palm. "The password," Graves whispered, leaning in. "The password is Foot!" The sound was small, insignificant. It sounded like a book falling off a shelf in the next room. Graves stopped speaking. His eyes went wide. A small, dark hole appeared in the center of his forehead. For a second, he just stood there, the rain dripping from the roof onto his face. Then, the light in his eyes vanished. His knees buckled. Thud! He collapsed forward. "Sniper!" Julian roared in my ear. "Get down, 12 o'clock, the catwalk." I threw myself to the ground behind a stack of metal crates just as a second bullet sparked against the floor where I had been standing. Ping! Concrete chips sprayed into my face. I scrambled on my hands and knees, pressing my back against the cold metal of the crate. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Graves was lying 5 feet away, face down in a puddle. The flash drive was still clutched in his dead hand. "Where is he?" I screamed into the comms. "High ground," Julian yelled. "He was using thermal dampening gear. I didn't see him until he fired. Stay put. Elena, I am engaging." Boom. The sound of Julian's rifle was not a whisper. It was a thunderclap. It shook the warehouse. High above, on the rusted catwalk, a spark erupted as Julian's bullet slammed into the metal railing. I heard a curse, followed by the sound of boots running on metal. Clang, clang, clang. "I have him pinned," Julian said. "He is moving to the west exit, Elena. You have 10 seconds before he has a line of sight on your position again. Get the drive." I looked at Graves. He was out in the open. To get the drive, I had to expose myself. "This is crazy," I muttered. I took a breath. I visualized the anatomy of the movement. 3 steps. Crouch. Grab. Roll. "Cover me," I yelled. I lunged. I burst from cover, sliding across the wet concrete like a baseball player stealing home. I reached Graves' body. His fingers were locked in a death grip around the lanyard. Rigor mortis hadn't set in, but fear had frozen his muscles. "Let go, Richard," I hissed, prying his fingers open. Food. 2 more shots. One tore through the fabric of my trench coat. The other hit the ground inches from my hand. "I can't see him," Julian shouted. "He is behind a pillar." I yanked the drive free. The lanyard snapped. I rolled backward, scrambling behind a heavy forklift just as a 3rd bullet punched a hole in Graves's back. The assassin was double-tapping the corpse. He wanted to be sure. "I have the package," I gasped, clutching the silver drive against my chest. My hands were shaking now, not from a neurological disorder, but from pure adrenaline. "Go," Julian ordered. "East exit. I will bring the car around. Do not stop running." I scrambled to my feet, keeping the forklift between me and the catwalk. I sprinted toward the side door. My lungs burned. The heavy boots felt like lead weights. I burst out into the rain. The cold air hit me like a physical slap. The black Rolls-Royce screeched around the corner, tires smoking on the wet pavement. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" Julian yelled. I dove into the car. Julian didn't wait for me to close the door. He floored the accelerator. The V12 engine roared, and the heavy car fishtailed, spraying mud before gripping the road and launching us forward. I pulled the door shut. Locking it, I slumped back against the seat, gasping for air. I looked down at my hand. The silver flash drive was wet with rain and blood. Richard Graves's blood. "Is he dead?" Julian asked, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "Instantly," I replied, wiping the blood onto my ruined dress. "He didn't suffer." "Did he give you the password?" Julian asked. "No," I said, staring at the drive. "He died before he could say it." Julian cursed, hitting the steering wheel. "Then it is useless. That drive will be military-grade encryption, without the key. It is just a piece of metal." I turned the drive over in my hand. On the back, etched into the silver casing, was a series of numbers. Coordinates, a date, it was an address. It was in 1080 Fifth Avenue, Penthouse B. I froze. "Julian," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know the password." "How?" "Because the address etched on this drive," I said, holding it up to the passing streetlights. "It is Carter's penthouse, the one I lived in for 3 years. "Graves hid the key in Carter's apartment?" Julian asked, skeptical. "No," I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots. "Graves said the patron list connects to everything. Why would Carter keep his brother alive? Why would he keep a comatose patient?" I remembered something small, something I had ignored for 3 years. In the master bedroom of the penthouse, there was a wall safe. Carter never used it. He said it was broken, but every night, before he went to sleep, he would touch the painting covering it, a painting of Icarus falling from the sky. "Project Icarus," I whispered. "The password isn't a word. Julian, it is a biometric key. Graves said he had the key in his head." "You mean he memorized it?" "No," I said, looking at the blood on my hand. "I mean literally. Graves had a retinal implant. I saw it when I looked at his eyes before he died. The pupil didn't dilate correctly." Julian slammed on the brakes, swerving the car to the side of the road. He turned to look at me, horror on his face. "Elena," Julian said slowly, "if the key was in his eye, and we left his body there, the assassin," I realized, feeling sick. "He didn't shoot Graves in the head to kill him. He shot him to destroy the brain, or to steal the eye." "Double tap," Julian said grimly. He shot the body again, to make sure. We have the lock, I said, clenching the drive. But the assassin just stole the key. Not necessarily, Julian said, shifting the car back into gear. If Graves was smart, he made a backup. You said the address on the drive is the penthouse. Yes. Then we have to get there before the assassin does, Julian said, the engine roaring back to life. Because if the assassin figures out what that address means, he is going to pay a visit to your former home, and Sarah is still on the lease. Sarah is in jail, I said. But the safe isn't, Julian countered. We have to break back into the home you just left. I looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets. I had walked out of that penthouse yesterday thinking I was free. Now. I had to break back in to find the one thing that could end this war. Drive, I said. And Julian, yes. Don't stop for red lights. The yellow police tape stretched across the gilded doors of the penthouse elevator like a crime scene ribbon in a cheap detective movie. It fluttered slightly in the draft of the service corridor. I stood there, staring at the plastic barrier that barred me from the home I had spent 3 years suffocating in. The police have sealed the main entrance, Julian whispered, checking the stairwell behind us. If we break the seal, the silent alarm goes straight to the precinct. We are not breaking the seal, I said, reaching for the keypad of the service elevator. We are using the help's entrance. Carter never changed the code. He couldn't be bothered to memorize a new sequence for the staff. I punched in the numbers, 1987, the year of the stock market crash, Carter's favorite year. The heavy steel doors slid open. The penthouse was dark. The floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Central Park were usually ablaze with light, turning the apartment into a glowing glass box in the sky. Tonight, it was a tomb. I stepped inside. The air was stale, smelling of old lilies and something else, something sharp and chemical. Stay close, Julian murmured, drawing his weapon. Something feels wrong. We moved through the kitchen. The stainless steel appliances gleamed in the moonlight. I walked past the marble island where I used to drink my morning coffee while Carter ignored me. It felt like walking through a museum of my own misery. We reached the living room. The furniture was draped in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dark. The painting, I whispered, pointing to the far wall of the master bedroom. There it was, The Fall of Icarus, a massive, pretentiously expensive oil painting Carter had bought to impress an investor. It hung directly over the bed where he had slept with Sarah. I walked toward it. My boots sank into the plush carpet. I reached out to touch the frame. Click. The sound came from the shadows near the walk-in closet. It was the distinct sound of a hammer being cocked on a pistol. Get down, Julian shouted. He tackled me. We hit the floor hard just as the room exploded with noise. Bang, bang. 2 shots tore through the canvas of the painting, shredding Icarus's wings. The vase on the nightstand shattered, raining ceramic shards onto the floor. Clear left, Julian yelled, rolling to his feet. A figure emerged from the closet. He was dressed in black tactical gear, his face covered by a mask. It was the assassin from the pier. He hadn't just beaten us here. He was waiting for us. He raised his gun, aiming directly at my head. Julian didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy crystal lamp from the side table and hurled it. The lamp struck the assassin's hand. The gun fired wild, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. The weapon clattered to the floor. The assassin didn't panic. He drew a combat knife, the blade dull and serrated. He lunged at Julian. Open the safe! Julian roared, intercepting the blade with his forearm. The sound of Kevlar tearing was sickening. Elena, get the key, I will hold him off. I scrambled toward the painting. Behind me, the sounds of brutal, close-quarters combat filled the room. Bodies slamming against walls, glass breaking, grunts of exertion. I grabbed the shredded canvas and ripped it off the wall. Behind it was a steel safe, a biometric safe. Damn it, I hissed. It needs a fingerprint. I didn't have Carter's finger. I looked around frantically. The assassin had kicked Julian into the vanity mirror. Glass exploded everywhere. Julian was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but he managed to land a heavy knee to the assassin's gut. "Hurry," Julian gasped. Think like a surgeon. Biometric scanners rely on capacitance. They need the electrical current of living skin, but this was an older model. It had a manual override keyhole hidden under the manufacturer's plate. I pulled a hairpin from my messy bun. It was flimsy, useless against a high-security lock. Then I saw it, on the floor, where the vase had shattered, a piece of jagged wire from the flower arrangement. I grabbed it. I jammed it into the override slot. I closed my eyes. I felt the pins inside the lock. Click, click. Behind me, the assassin threw Julian over the bed. Julian landed hard, but he grabbed the fallen pistol. The assassin kicked the gun away. He pulled a canister from his belt. "Fire in the hole!" the assassin shouted, his voice distorted. He threw the canister. It wasn't a grenade, it was an incendiary device. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted in the center of the room. The chemical smell I had noticed earlier, gasoline. He had soaked the carpet. The heat was instantaneous. The flames licked up the silk drapes, turning the glass house into a furnace. "Elena!" Julian screamed through the fire. Click. The safe door popped open. I reached inside. There was no money, no jewelry, no ledger. There was only a small, cryogenic cooling box. It was the size of a jewelry case, humming softly. I grabbed it. I flipped the latch. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a single glass vial containing a dark red liquid. The label on the vial read Subject 0, DNA key. It was Lucas's blood. The flash drive wasn't password protected. It was DNA encrypted. It needed a physical sample of the donor to unlock the data. That was why they kept Lucas alive. He was the living password to the patron's empire. "I have it!" I screamed, clutching the box. The assassin saw the box. He abandoned the fight with Julian and lunged through the flames toward me. He didn't care about burning. He was a machine. "No, you don't," Julian snarled. Julian tackled the assassin from behind, driving him into the burning drapes. The two men crashed through the floor-to-ceiling window. Crash! The glass shattered outward. The wind from the storm outside rushed in, feeding the fire, turning it into a roaring vortex. I ran to the broken window. We were 50 stories up. Julian was hanging onto the metal frame of the window with one hand. The assassin was falling. I watched his black shape plummet down into the darkness of the New York night, disappearing into the rain. "Julian!" I reached out. He grabbed my hand. His glove was slippery with blood, but I held on. I pulled with everything I had. My muscles burned. My own hands, once celebrated for their delicacy, were now instruments of survival. I hauled him up over the ledge. He collapsed onto the balcony floor, gasping for air. "We have to go," Julian wheezed, looking back at the inferno consuming the bedroom. "The fire alarms are triggered. The fire department will be here in 2 minutes. "The service elevator," I said, helping him up. "It has independent power." We ran back through the smoke-filled apartment. The heat was blistering. My eyes watered, blinding me. But I knew this layout by heart. I knew every corner of this cage. We burst into the service corridor just as the sprinkler system activated inside. Hiss! Black water began to spray over the fire. We jumped into the elevator. I hit the button for the garage. The doors closed, sealing out the smoke and the chaos. I leaned against the metal wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I held the cryogenic box against my chest like a baby. "We have the blood," I whispered. "We can unlock the drive." Julian wiped the blood from his eye. That assassin, he wasn't trying to kill us at first. He was stalling. He was waiting for the fire to destroy the evidence. "He failed," I said, looking at the vial. "Did he?" Julian asked grimly. "Elena, look at the vial." I looked down. A hairline crack ran down the side of the glass vial. The red liquid was seeping out, soaking into the foam. "It is compromised," Julian said. "If the sample is contaminated by air for too long, the DNA degrades, the encryption key will rot." "How long do we have?" I asked, panic rising again. "Maybe an hour." Julian said. We need to plug that drive into a computer and use the sample now, before it becomes useless red water. We can't go to Apex, I said. The police will be swarming it after the Graves murder. Where then? The elevator hit the ground floor. There is only one place with a biosequencer powerful enough to process this in under an hour, I said, standing up. And it is the last place anyone would look for me. Where? The veterinary zoo clinic in the Bronx, I said. I donated the machine 3 years ago for tax purposes. It is off the grid. The doors opened. We ran toward the car. The race wasn't over. It had just turned into a countdown. The digital clock on the dashboard of the Rolls-Royce read 2:14 a.m. We were flying down the Bronx River Parkway at 100 miles an hour. The rain had turned the windshield into a kaleidoscope of smeared streetlights, but Julian didn't lift his foot off the gas. He drove with the focused intensity of a man who knew that slowing down meant death. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the cryogenic box. The hum of the cooling unit was failing. The little green light that indicated temperature stability was flickering to yellow inside the box. The crack in the vial had widened. The dark crimson fluid, the only key to bringing down the Sterling Empire, was seeping into the foam padding. "How is the sample?" Julian shouted over the roar of the engine as we drifted around a sharp curve. "Degrading," I replied, my voice tight. "The red blood cells are lysing. If the DNA chains break down before we get it into the sequencer, we have nothing but a tube of useless protein." "We are here," Julian announced. The car smashed through the wooden gate of the employee entrance to the Bronx Zoo. Splinters of wood flew like shrapnel. We skidded across the wet asphalt of the service road, coming to a halt in front of a low brick building nestled between the primate enclosure and the reptile house. "The Veterinary Medical Center." We bailed out of the car. The air here smelled different wet earth, musk, and the primal scent of large predators. Somewhere in the dark, a lion roared, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in my chest. "The alarm system?" Julian asked, running toward the glass doors. "I designed it," I said, sprinting beside him. "It doesn't trigger if you use the emergency vet code." I reached the keypad. My hands were shaking, not from a tremor, but from the freezing rain and adrenaline. I punched in the code, CADUCEUS. The door buzzed and clicked open. We burst into the clinic. It smelled of antiseptic and animal feed. We ran past the operating tables sized for elephants and giraffes, heading straight for the genetic lab in the back. "There," I pointed. The mass spectrometer and DNA sequencer sat in the corner, a hulking machine of beige plastic and chrome. It looked like a glorified printer, but it cost more than the Ferrari Carter had crashed 3 years ago. I slammed the cryogenic box onto the counter. I opened it. The vial was almost empty. The blood had leaked out, leaving a sticky, dark residue on the foam. There were maybe 3 drops left at the bottom of the glass. "Is it enough?" Julian asked, hovering over my shoulder. "It has to be," I whispered. I grabbed a pipette. I treated those last 3 drops like liquid diamonds. I extracted them carefully. My breath held tight in my lungs. I transferred the sample onto a slide and shoved it into the sequencer's intake slot. I plugged the encrypted flash drive into the machine's USB port. "Initialize," I commanded, typing furiously on the keyboard. "Bypass standard protocols. Run a direct match sequence." The screen flickered. A progress bar appeared. "Matching DNA, 10-try." "Come on," Julian muttered. Pacing the small room, he checked his watch. "The fire department will have cleared the penthouse by now. If the police find the safe open, they will know we took something." "Matching, 30%. The machine whirred. It was struggling. The sample was corrupted by oxygen exposure. "Error. Partial match. Retrying." "Don't you dare fail on me," I hissed at the machine. "I bought you. I own you. Work." "Matching, 65%. Suddenly, the lights in the clinic flickered. The storm outside was messing with the power grid. "If we lose power, the sequence aborts," Julian warned. "And we lose the sample." "I know," I snapped. "Matching, 88%. The progress bar seemed to crawl. Outside, the sirens were getting closer. Not police sirens. Private security sirens. The zoo's patrol was coming to investigate the broken gate. 99%. Ding. Access granted. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. The screen shifted. The red locked icon turned green. Files began to cascade down the monitor. Thousands of them. "We are in," I said. "Julian, look at this." I opened the folder labeled Project Icarus. It was a ledger, but not just numbers. It was a detailed log of payments for the illegal facility under Apex Biotech, payments for the equipment, the doctors, the hush money. "Follow the money," Julian said, leaning in. "Who signed the checks?" I scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet. The funds originated from a shell company called Ethelgard Holdings. Ethelgard. I frowned. That sounds like a retirement home. "Run a cross-referencey," Julian said. "Who owns Ethelgard?" I typed in the name. The database churned. It linked to a blind trust in the Cayman Islands. "Dead end," I said, frustrated. "It is anonymous." "No," Julian said, pointing to a small metadata tag on the wire transfer. "Look at the routing number. That bank code. I know that code." "You do?" "It is the routing number for the Congressional Credit Union," Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Only sitting members of the U.S. Senate have accounts there." I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. "The Senate?" I asked. I ran a search for the account holder ID associated with that routing number. The screen flashed. A name appeared. Beneficiary William J. Maxwell. I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to float, rearranging themselves into a nightmare. "Maxwell," I whispered. "Senator Maxwell." "The man you just saved," Julian said, his voice void of emotion. "The man who stood next to you at the gala. The man who called Carter a terrorist." "He owns the shell company that funded the lab," I said, the horror rising in my throat. "He paid for the facility that tortured Lucas. He is the patron." "It makes sense," Julian said, pacing again. "Carter was just the face. Maxwell needed Sterling Medical to push his healthcare bill. He needed a puppet CEO who would cut corners to lower costs, so the government contracts would be cheaper. Lucas wouldn't play ball, so Maxwell had him removed." "I saved him," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. My knuckles turned white. "I opened his skull. I fixed his brain. I gave him a second life." "You didn't know," Julian said. "I saved the devil," I hissed. "I gave the monster a new heart." My phone rang. The sound was so loud in the quiet lab that I jumped. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen lit up. Unknown number. I stared at it. I knew who it was. I could feel it. I pressed answer. I put it on speaker. "Hello, doctor," a familiar grandfatherly voice said. It was smooth, warm, and utterly terrifying. "Senator," I said. My voice was steady, cold. "I assume you are at the zoo," Senator Maxwell said pleasantly. "My security team saw your car crash through the gate. You really should drive more carefully. My dear, it is a wet night." "You killed Graves," I said. "Graves was a loose end," Maxwell replied, as if discussing a budget cut. "And Carter, well, Carter was a disappointment, but you, Elena, you are a surprise." "I have the files, William," I said, dropping his title. "I know everything. I know about Ethelgard. I know about Lucas. I know you are the one pulling the strings." "Do you?" Maxwell chuckled. "And what do you plan to do with that information? Go to the press. I own the press. Go to the FBI. I approve their budget. You are a very talented surgeon. Elena, but you are a terrible politician." "I am not a politician," I said. "I am the person holding the knife." "And a very sharp knife it is," Maxwell agreed. "You saved my life yesterday. I am grateful. That is why I am giving you a choice." "What choice?" "Walk away," Maxwell said. "Destroy the drive. Forget about Lucas. Go back to being the beautiful, rich ex-wife. Apex is yours. Keep it. Make your billions. Just let sleeping dogs lie." "And if I don't?" "Then you become a loose end," Maxwell said. His tone didn't change. It was still grandfatherly. And I have very efficient people for loose ends. You saw what happened to the assassin at the penthouse. He was just a freelancer. My real team is much better. Is that a threat? It is a diagnosis, Maxwell said. You have a terminal condition. Elena, it is called knowing too much. The only cure is amnesia. I don't get amnesia, I said. I give lobotomies. Pity, Maxwell sighed. Look out the window, my dear. I looked up. Outside, in the dark rain, a dozen red laser dots appeared on the glass of the clinic door. They danced like fireflies. The lions are hungry tonight, Maxwell whispered. Click. I dropped the phone. Julian, I screamed. Crash. The glass front of the clinic exploded inward as tear gas canisters smashed through the windows. White smoke filled the room instantly. Masks! Julian yelled, grabbing a surgical mask from the counter and shoving it onto my face. They are here? I choked out, grabbing the flash drive. We were trapped in a glass box, surrounded by the most powerful man in America, and the only weapon we had was a USB stick and a scalpel. Back door! Julian shouted, firing his gun blindly into the smoke. The back door leads to the tiger enclosure, I yelled back. Better the tigers than the death squad. Julian grabbed my arm. We ran into the white fog, heading straight for the lion's den. The tear gas canister hissed on the floor like a dying snake, spewing a thick white fog that burned my throat and watered my eyes. I grabbed Julian's arm, my fingers digging into his tactical vest as we stumbled blindly toward the rear exit of the clinic. The sound of heavy boots slamming against the linoleum floor echoed behind us. The death squad was inside. Door! I choked out, pointing to the heavy steel barrier labeled Warning Class of Predators. Julian didn't hesitate. He raised his boot and kicked the locking mechanism. The door rattled but held. It was reinforced steel, designed to keep 400-pound killing machines inside. Shoot the lock, I ordered. Julian fired 3 rounds into the keypad. Bang, bang, bang. Sparks showered down, and the magnetic seal disengaged with a heavy clank. We burst out into the night. The rain was torrential, washing the tear gas from my face instantly. But the air here was different. It didn't smell like the city. It smelled of wet fur, raw meat, and danger. We were in the service corridor of the Tiger Mountain exhibit. High ground! Julian yelled, pointing to the maintenance catwalk that ran above the sunken enclosures. If we get to the tower, we can jump the perimeter fence. We sprinted across the slippery metal grating. Below us, the exhibit was a dark abyss of rocks and foliage. Foot! Bullets whizzed past my ear, sparking against the railing. The tactical team had breached the door behind us. Red laser sights danced across my wet back. They are gaining! Julian shouted, turning to fire a suppression volley. Go, Elena! I will hold them at the choke point. No, I said, stopping at the control junction box midway along the catwalk. I looked down at the dark pits below. I saw movement, massive, striped shadows pacing in the rain. They were agitated by the noise. We don't need to hold them. Julian, we need to feed them. I ripped the cover off the control panel. It was a chaotic mess of wires, but I knew the schematic. I had consulted on the safety override protocols. What are you doing? Julian asked, reloading his weapon. Changing the food chain, I said. I found the master release circuit. I didn't have a code, so I used the scalpel I had swiped from the clinic. I jammed the blade into the solenoid, bridging the connection. Sparks flew. A siren began to wail a low, mournful sound meant to warn keepers of a containment breach. Clang, clang, clang. Below us, the heavy hydraulic gates separating the tigers from the service area began to rise. The mercenaries charged onto the catwalk. There were 6 of them, dressed in black combat gear, moving with professional efficiency. They saw us. They raised their rifles. Then, a roar shook the very foundations of the metal walkway. It was a sound so primal, so terrifyingly loud that it froze the air in my lungs. A 600-pound Siberian tiger leaped from the shadows of the pit, clearing the 12-foot gap to the lower service platform where the mercenaries were advancing. The lead mercenary didn't even have time to scream. He just vanished into the darkness, pulled down by a force of nature that cared nothing for his body armor. "Contact! Contact!" a voice screamed over the radio, panic shattering their discipline. "Target is— oh God, shoot it! Shoot it!" Another tiger surged up the ramp, then a third. The enclosure was open. The kings of the jungle were reclaiming their territory. Gunfire erupted, wild and desperate. The rhythmic tat-tat-tat of suppressed rifles was drowned out by the snarls of the beasts and the wet, crunching sounds of violence. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I just heard the screams of men who realized too late that they were not the apex predators tonight. "Move!" Julian grabbed me, pulling me away from the railing. We ran toward the vehicle depot at the end of the catwalk. The chaos behind us was a cacophony of slaughter. Maxwell had sent wolves to catch a sheep, but he had forgotten about the tigers. We reached the garage. A white zoo maintenance truck sat idling, its engine running to keep the heater on for the night crew. "I will drive," Julian said, reaching for the door handle. Crack! A single shot rang out from the shadows of the garage. It was a straggler, a sniper who had flanked us. Julian's leg buckled. He grunted, a sharp, guttural sound of pain, and collapsed against the side of the truck. Blood exploded from his thigh, dark and fast. "Julian!" I screamed, dropping the flash drive to catch him. I looked toward the shooter. He was stepping out from behind a stack of hay bales, raising his pistol for the kill shot. I didn't think. I reacted. I pulled the Glock from Julian's holster. It was heavy in my hand. I had never fired a gun in my life. I didn't aim. I just pointed the barrel at the shadow and pulled the trigger until the slide locked back. Bang, 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 bang! The recoil jarred my shoulder. The shooter dropped, clutching his chest. I didn't wait to check if he was dead. I grabbed Julian by the vest and hauled him up. He was dead weight, his face gray with shock. "Get in," I commanded, shoving him into the passenger seat. I jumped into the driver's seat. The truck smelled of stale cigarettes and fertilizer. I slammed the gear shift into drive and stomped on the gas. The truck lurched forward. We smashed through the wooden garage doors, splinters raining down on the windshield. We hit the service road, bouncing violently over the speed bumps. "My leg!" Julian gasped, clutching his thigh. "Artery hit!" I glanced over. The blood was soaking his tactical pants, pooling on the rubber floor mat. It was bright red, arterial. "Put pressure on it," I yelled, swerving onto the main road. "Don't you die on me! Julian Thorne, you are not allowed to die!" I looked in the rear-view mirror. No one was following. The team, back at the exhibit, was occupied. We needed to get off the grid. Hospitals were out of the question. Maxwell would have eyes on every emergency room in the tri-state area. "Pull over," Julian wheezed. "I can't. Feeling lightheaded." "No," I said, my mind racing. "If I stop, we are sitting ducks. Take the wheel." "What?" "Take the wheel," I shouted. "Keep your foot on the gas. Keep us moving. I have to stop the bleeding now." Julian groaned but reached over with his left hand. Grabbing the steering wheel, he kept his right foot jammed on the accelerator. I unbuckled my seatbelt. The truck was doing 60 miles an hour down the empty highway. I climbed over the center console, squeezing into the cramped footwell of the passenger side. "Keep it steady," I ordered, pushing Julian's hands away from the wound. I ripped the fabric of his pants open. The bullet had entered the mid-thigh, nicking the femoral artery. The blood flow was rhythmic, pumping out with every beat of his heart. He had minutes. "I need a tourniquet," I muttered. I looked around. Nothing, just a toolbox on the floor. I grabbed a screwdriver and the seatbelt strap. I wrapped the nylon strap around his upper thigh, high above the wound. I used the screwdriver as a windlass, twisting it tight. "This is going to hurt," I warned. "Do it," Julian gritted out through clenched teeth. I twisted. Julian screamed, a raw sound that filled the cabin. I twisted harder, cutting off the circulation until the bright red fountain slowed to a trickle. "Hold this," I told him, forcing his hand onto the screwdriver. "Do not let go." I opened the toolbox, a pair of needle-nose pliers, a roll of duct tape, a lighter. "Primitive," I whispered, "but it will work." I flicked the lighter, holding the flame under the tips of the pliers until the metal glowed red hot. The smell of butane mixed with the copper scent of blood. "Elena," Julian whispered, his eyes rolling back. "The road. Curving." "Drive the car, Julian," I yelled. I jammed the hot pliers into the bullet wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the truck. Julian's body convulsed, his foot slipping off the gas pedal. The truck swerved violently, clipping a guardrail. Sparks flew outside the window. "Stay with me!" I screamed, clamping the vessel shut. I pulled the pliers out, and the bleeding had stopped, cauterized. I grabbed the duct tape and wrapped the wound tightly. I climbed back into the driver's seat just as the truck drifted toward the median strip. I grabbed the wheel, correcting the skid. Julian was slumped against the window, unconscious but breathing. I looked at my hands. They were covered in his blood. The same hands that had signed a $500 million deal this morning were now stained with the gore of a street war. I looked at the flash drive sitting in the cup holder. It was safe. We were alive. But we had nowhere to go. No home, no clinic, no allies. Wait! There was one ally. One person who hated Maxwell as much as I did. One person who had nothing left to lose. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized from the files on the drive. "Hello," a confused, sleepy voice answered. "Senator Maxwell just tried to kill me," I said into the phone. "And I have the proof that he has been stealing from you for 10 years. "Who is this?" the voice asked. "This is Dr. Vance," I said. "I need a safe house, Mrs. Maxwell, and, in exchange, I will give you your husband's head on a platter." The silence on the other end was long. Then, a cold, bitter laugh echoed. "The pool house key is under the mat," Mrs. Maxwell said. "Come to the Hamptons. The bastard never comes here anymore." I hung up. I looked at Julian. "Hang on, soldier. We are going to the last place he will ever look." I turned the truck east, toward the sunrise, toward the Hamptons, toward the final battle. The Hamptons at dawn was a study in aggressive tranquility. The Atlantic Ocean crashed against the pristine white sand with a rhythmic, indifferent violence, while seagulls circled overhead like aerial surveillance drones. I drove the battered, bullet-riddled zoo maintenance truck down the gravel driveway of the Maxwell estate. We looked like a war zone crashing into a Monet painting. The mansion was a sprawling colonial beast, white clapboard and black shutters, sitting on 10 acres of manicured lawn that cost more to maintain than the GDP of a small country. I stopped the truck in front of the grand entrance. The engine sputtered and died, exhaling a final cloud of black smoke that drifted toward the rose garden. On the porch, sitting in a white wicker chair, was a woman. She was wrapped in a cashmere shawl the color of old money, holding a crystal tumbler filled with a red liquid. It wasn't juice. Catherine Maxwell, the wife of the most powerful man in the Senate, took a sip of her drink as I stepped out of the truck, my clothes stained with mud and Julian's blood. She didn't flinch. She just lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were sharp, tired, and completely devoid of surprise. "You are late," Catherine said, her voice raspy from decades of Virginia Slims and unspoken resentments. "The Bloody Marys are getting warm." "I hit traffic," I said, walking around to the passenger side to help Julian. "And a tiger." "Sounds like a Tuesday," Catherine drawled. She stood up, her movements elegant but heavy. "Bring him in. The guest wing is prepped. I told the staff to take the day off. We are alone." I pulled Julian out of the truck. He was conscious but burning with fever. The makeshift tourniquet held, but the infection risk was skyrocketing. "I need antibiotics," I said, hauling Julian's weight up the marble stairs. "And a sterile field." "Third door on the left," Catherine said, opening the front door. "My husband keeps a full surgical suite in the house. He is hypochondriacal." We laid Julian on the bed in a room that looked more like a 5-star hotel suite than a hospital. I went to work immediately. I found the medical cabinet Catherine pointed out. It was stocked better than the ER at Mount Sinai. High-grade broad-spectrum antibiotics, lidocaine, proper sutures. For the next hour, The only sounds in the room were the snipping of scissors and Julian's ragged breathing. Catherine sat in the corner, watching me work, nursing her drink. "You have good hands," she observed as I tied off the final stitch on Julian's thigh. "Better than the butchers William hires." "William hires butchers to kill people," I said, stripping off my gloves and washing my hands in the ensuite sink. "I hire myself to fix them." I injected a dose of morphine into Julian's IV. His face relaxed, the pain lines smoothing out as he drifted into a deep sleep. He was safe, for now. I turned to Catherine. She was holding out a second glass. "Vodka and tomato juice," she said. "Heavy on the vodka. You look like you need it." I took the glass. The cold crystal felt good against my hot skin. I took a long drink. The alcohol burned, sharp and grounding. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, looking her in the eye. "I just declared war on your husband." Catherine laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. She walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. "Do you know what my husband calls me? Elena," she asked. "He calls me the asset. Not his wife, not the mother of his children. An asset, something to be depreciated over time." She turned back, her face hardening. "William isn't just corrupt, Elena. He is sick. He has been dying for 10 years. "Dying of what?" I asked. The files mentioned bone marrow, stem cells. "He has the same blood disorder Carter has," Catherine revealed. "Aplastic anemia. It is genetic. William is Carter's biological father." I dropped the glass. It hit the thick carpet with a dull thud, not breaking, but spilling the red drink like a fresh wound. "Carter is his son," I whispered. "But the Sterlings." "Carter was an illegitimate child," Catherine said, her voice dripping with disgust. "William had an affair with Mrs. Sterling 30 years ago. Why do you think he helped Carter rise so fast? Why do you think he looked the other way when Carter enslaved Lucas? Lucas was the spare, Carter was the favorite, and William needs them both. He was using his own sons as spare parts." I realized, the horror of it settling in. That is why Project Icarus exists. It isn't just about money. It is about immortality. He wants to live forever using their blood. "He is 80 years old, trying to buy another 50, Catherine said, refilling her glass. "He drained our bank accounts to build that lab. He promised me it was for legacy. But the only legacy he cares about is his own pulse." She walked over to a mahogany desk and picked up a remote control. She turned on the massive wall-mounted TV. The screen showed a news ticker manhunt underway. Terrorist attack at Bronx Zoo. Senator Maxwell's face appeared on the screen. He was standing at a podium, looking grave, patriotic, and completely innocent. "Tonight," the senator said to the cameras, "I will be sitting down with Primetime News for an exclusive interview. I will reveal the truth about the radical eco-terrorists who attacked our city's beloved zoo. We will not be intimidated." "He is spinning the narrative," I said, watching his lying face. "He is going to blame us for the tigers. He will paint me as a terrorist." "He is going on live TV at 8 p.m., Catherine said. "It is the highest-rated slot in the country. He thinks he is untouchable." "He thinks I am running," I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. "He thinks I am hiding in a ditch somewhere." I looked at the flash drive sitting on the bedside table next to Julian. "Does this house have a secure server?" I asked. "William runs his entire shadow campaign from the basement server room." Catherine smirked. "I know the password. It is the name of his first mistress. He is sentimental like that." "Take me to it," I said. "I am not going to hide. Catherine, I am going to produce his show." We went down to the basement. It was a fortress of technology, humming with cooling fans. I sat at the terminal. Catherine typed in the password, Marilyn. "Access granted." I plugged in the drive. The files from the Chimera protocol loaded instantly. Videos of Lucas in the tank, financial transfers signed by Maxwell, emails discussing the assassination of Richard Graves. "If I dump all of this now, the news cycle will be too chaotic," I said, typing furiously. "He will call it deepfake AI. He will deny it. I need to trap him." "How?" "I am going to give him a script," I said. "He is going on TV to talk about the terrorists. I am going to make sure the evidence plays on the screen behind him while he speaks. You want to hack the network feed? Catherine asked. No, I said, opening the Apex Biotech official Twitter account. I still had the login credentials. I am going to use the one thing he can't control, the stock market. I began to upload a single file, not the whole database, just a teaser. It was a video clip from the security camera in the Apex basement. It showed Senator Maxwell standing over Lucas's coma bed, saying clearly, "Keep him asleep. My blood count is dropping. I need a harvest on Tuesday." I titled the post, "The Vampire of the Senate." Wait, Catherine said, grabbing my wrist. Don't post it yet. Why? If you post it now, he cancels the interview, she said sharply. He goes into a bunker. You lose your shot. She was right. She knew how the game was played. So what do? We send it to him privately. Catherine smiled, a cruel, predatory smile. We bait the hook. Tell him you want to make a deal. Tell him you will trade the drive for amnesty, make him feel safe enough to go on stage. And then, Catherine said, pointing to the server options. You set the upload to auto-publish the moment he says the word trust on live television. He uses that word in every speech. It is his verbal tick. A trigger word, I said, impressed. Catherine, you are terrifying. I learned from the worst, she replied. I drafted the email to the senator's private encrypted address. Subject surrender. Body, you win. Dad, I am tired. I have the drive. I want to trade it for my life and Julian's. Meet me after the interview. I will be watching. I hit send. Almost immediately, the phone in the room rang. It was the private landline. Only one person called this line. Catherine picked it up. She listened for a moment, then handed it to me. He wants to negotiate, she whispered. I took the phone. Elena. Maxwell's voice came through, smooth and victorious. I knew you would come to your senses. The Hamptons. Really, I almost respect the audacity. I am done running. William, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. Julian is hurt. I can't fight the whole government. Smart girl, Maxwell purred. Bring the drive to the studio tonight, after the broadcast. I will have a helicopter ready to take you anywhere in the world. New identities, a fresh start. And the death squad. Called off. He lied. Just watch the interview. Elena, you will see. I am a forgiving man. I will be watching, I said. I hung up. I turned to Catherine. He took the bait. He thinks he won. He is going to walk onto that stage thinking he is God, Catherine said, pouring herself another drink from the minibar. And he is going to walk off it as a convict. I went back to the computer. I set the timer. I linked the upload trigger to the voice recognition software monitoring the news feed. Target word trust, action upload all. Now, I said, standing up and smoothing my ruined dress. We wait for the show. I looked at the screen. The countdown to the broadcast was 3 hours. 3 hours until this king of New York fell. 3 hours until I finished the surgery I started 3 years ago. Catherine, I said, do you have anything in your closet that isn't a shawl? Catherine looked me up and down. Honey, I have a closet full of war paint. Let's get you dressed for the slaughter. The 80-inch television screen dominated the living room of the Maxwell estate, casting a cold, artificial blue light over Catherine and me. I was no longer wearing the ruined gala dress. Catherine had raided her closet, dressing me in a white power suit that belonged to her pre-marriage days, back when she was a ruthless litigator. It fit perfectly, a suit of armor made of Italian wool. On the screen, the primetime news logo spun with dramatic orchestral music. The camera cut to the studio, where Senator William Maxwell sat comfortably in a leather armchair. He looked impeccable. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. His suit was navy blue to convey authority, and his tie was a soft burgundy to suggest warmth. He did not look like a man who ran a human organ farm in a basement. He looked like the grandfather of the nation. He is good, Catherine whispered, swirling the ice in her glass. Look at his hands, open palms, subconscious signal of honesty. He practiced that in the mirror for 20 years. It won't save him, I said, my eyes glued to the laptop sitting on the coffee table. The program was running in the background, listening to the audio feed, waiting for the sonic fingerprint of one specific word. The interviewer, a famous journalist known for her softball questions, leaned in with a concerned expression. "Senator," she began, her voice somber, "the events of the last 24 hours have been shocking. A terrorist attack at the Bronx Zoo, your son, Carter Sterling, arrested by the FBI, rumors of financial misconduct. What do you have to say to the American people tonight?" Maxwell sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He looked directly into the camera lens. He was looking at the voters, but I knew he was looking for me. "Diane," Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion, "it is a tragedy. My son, Carter, has always struggled. I tried to help him, but sometimes the demons win. As for the attack at the zoo, let me be clear. These were radical eco-terrorists trying to steal dangerous pathogens. I am just grateful that our brave law enforcement officers stopped them." "Liar," I hissed at the screen. "And to the person orchestrating these attacks," Maxwell continued, his eyes hardening slightly. "To the woman calling herself Dr. Vance. I say this, you cannot hide. You cannot blackmail the United States government." "He is calling you out," Catherine noted. "He thinks you are watching from a hole in the ground." "I am watching," I said, "and I am holding the detonator." "Senator," the interviewer asked, "with the election coming up in 3 months, how do you expect to lead this country when your own family is in chaos?" Maxwell sat up straighter. This was his moment, the prepared monologue. "Chaos is exactly why we need strong leadership. Diane," Maxwell said, his voice rising in a crescendo of patriotic fervor. "We live in dangerous times. Enemies are at the gate. They want to tear down our institutions. They want to destroy our healthcare system. They want to make us weak." On my laptop screen, the audio waveform spiked. He was building up to it. "But I believe in strength," Maxwell declared. "I believe in sacrifice. And most of all, I believe that the bond between a leader and his people is sacred." He leaned forward. The camera zoomed in for a tight close-up of his sincere, lying face. "To move forward," Maxwell said softly, "we need to rebuild the one thing that holds this great nation together. We need to rebuild." I held my breath. "Trust." Click. On my laptop, the red bar turned green. Voice pattern confirmed. Executing upload. The effect was instantaneous. In the studio, the massive digital screens behind the senator, which were displaying the American flag, suddenly glitched, the stars and stripes distorted, tearing apart in a shower of digital static. "What is happening?" the interviewer asked, looking around nervously. "We are having some technical difficulties." Then the image cleared. It was not a flag. It was a grainy, high-contrast video from a security camera. The date stamp was from 3 years ago. The audio boomed through the studio speakers, drowning out the confusion. "Keep him asleep," the voice on the screen commanded. It was Maxwell's voice, cold, clinical. "My blood count is dropping. I need a harvest on Tuesday." The video showed Maxwell standing over a hospital bed. In the bed was a comatose man. The camera zoomed in. The face was unmistakable, Lucas Sterling. In the studio, the audience gasped, a collective sound of horror that sucked the air out of the room. Maxwell froze. He turned around to look at the screen. His face went pale, the mask of the statesman cracking to reveal the monster underneath. "Cut the feed," Maxwell screamed, standing up. "Cut the damn feed! It is a deep fake. It is AI." But the video changed. It showed bank transfers. It showed emails. It showed a document titled Project Icarus Ethical Waivers Denied. And at the bottom of every page was the signature of William J. Maxwell. "That is not AI, Senator," the interviewer whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "That is your signature." My phone buzzed, a notification from the FBI Cybercrimes Division. Anonymous tip received. Priority 1. "It is out," I said, standing up. "Every news outlet in the world just got the link. Every phone in America just got the push notification. In the studio, chaos erupted. The producers were running onto the stage, but not to help Maxwell. They were filming him. The cameras were circling him like sharks. Maxwell pulled out his phone. He was trying to call someone, his fixer, his assassin. My phone rang. He was calling me. I picked up. I put it on speaker so Catherine could hear. "You bitch!" Maxwell snarled. His voice was no longer grandfatherly. It was the growl of a cornered animal. "You think this ends here? I am the Senate Majority Leader. I will burn you. I will burn everything." "Look to your left, William," I said calmly. On the TV screen, the side doors of the studio burst open. A tactical team swarmed in, but they weren't wearing the black uniforms of his mercenaries. They were wearing blue windbreakers with yellow letters, FBI. "Senator Maxwell," the lead agent shouted, leveling his weapon. "Step away from the interviewer. Put your hands in the air." "You can't touch me," Maxwell screamed, backing away. "I have immunity. I am the government and—" "Not anymore," I said into the phone. "The video of you ordering the death of Richard Graves just finished uploading. Immunity doesn't cover murder one. William—" Maxwell looked at the agents, then at the camera, and finally, he looked at his phone. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling with the realization of his total defeat. "I told you," I replied. "I am the doctor, and I just cut out the cancer." On screen, the agents tackled him. The phone went flying from his hand, clattering across the studio floor. The last thing the microphone picked up was the click of handcuffs tightening around his wrists. The feed cut to black. The network logo reappeared, silent and ominous. I lowered the phone. The room in the Hamptons was quiet, save for the sound of the ocean outside. Catherine stood up. She walked over to the TV and turned it off. The reflection of the room faded to black. "Well," Catherine said, picking up her glass, "that was better than the Super Bowl." She turned to me. "He is gone. Carter is gone. The assets will be frozen. The lawyers will spend 10 years picking over the carcass of the estate." "And Lucas?" I asked. "He is the rightful heir. If he wakes up, he inherits what is left." "If he wakes up," Catherine repeated. She looked toward the guest room where Julian was sleeping. "You saved one man tonight. Elena, can you save another?" I walked to the window. The sun was rising over the Atlantic. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple and gold. "I don't know," I admitted. "Lucas has been asleep for 3 years. His muscles have atrophied. His brain chemistry is altered. Waking him up might be harder than taking down the senator." "But you are going to try?" Catherine stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "I have one last surgery to perform." I turned back to her. "Thank you, Catherine, for the suit and the server." "Don't thank me," she said, taking a sip of her drink. I just wanted to see the look on his face when he realized his asset had turned into a liability. "Now, get out of my house. I have a divorce to file and a bottle of scotch to finish." I walked into the guest room. Julian was awake. He was sitting up in bed, watching the news on his phone. He looked pale, but his eyes were sharp. "I saw it," Julian said as I entered. "They are calling it the biggest political scandal in American history. Maxwell is being held without bail. Carter is being transferred to a maximum security facility." "It is over," I said. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline crash hitting me like a physical weight. "Not yet," Julian said, showing me his phone screen. It was a live feed from the front of the Apex Biotech building in Manhattan. A crowd had gathered. Reporters, protesters, former employees, but they weren't protesting. They were cheering. And in the middle of the crowd, someone had hung a banner. "Welcome back, Dr. V." "They know," Julian said. "The files you released. They had your digital signature. The world knows Elena Vance is Dr. V. You are not just a CEO anymore. Elena, you are a symbol." I looked at the image. Thousands of people, waiting for me. "I didn't want to be a symbol," I whispered. "I just wanted my life back." "You can't go back," Julian said, reaching out to take my hand. His grip was weak, but warm. "The housewife is dead. Long live the Queen. I squeezed his hand. He was right. Elena Sterling, the trembling victim, was gone. She had burned in the penthouse fire. We have to go back to the city, I said, standing up. Lucas is waiting at the clinic, and I have a company to run. I will drive, Julian said, trying to swing his legs off the bed. You will ride in the back, I corrected him, pushing him gently back down. I am driving today. I walked out of the room, grabbing the keys to Catherine's vintage convertible from the hallway table. The war was won, but the reconstruction was just beginning, and I had a feeling that waking up Lucas Sterling was going to unleash a new set of problems that even I couldn't predict. The chaos of the city was a physical force. The motorcade pulled up to the secured back entrance of my private clinic in Midtown, but the crowd was still overwhelming, the sound of flashbulbs clicking and journalists shouting my name. Dervance. Dervance reverberated through the armored glass of Catherine's convertible. I ignored the noise. The opinion of the world was irrelevant now. Julian, leaning heavily on a cane, opened the clinic door. He looked pale, but steady. Go, I told him. I will follow. I need 5 minutes. I walked through the sterile corridors. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the soft, steady thump, thump, thump of the heart monitor next to Lucas Sterling's bed. He was in the ICU, surrounded by machines that maintained his fragile, forced sleep. I stood over him. He had been unconscious for 3 years, a biological hostage in a war between 2 greedy brothers and a corrupt politician. Now, the monsters were caged, and it was time for the victim to be set free. Julian was adjusting the IV lines. We have reversed the pentobarbital cocktail, he said, checking the charts. The neuroactivity is spiking. It is time to see if 3 years of coma has left him with a mind to claim his inheritance. It has, I said, pulling on a pair of sterile gloves. Lucas was strong enough to keep breathing while they drained him. His will is stronger than Carter's fear. I walked to the bedside. I picked up a syringe containing a carefully calibrated mixture of neurostimulants. This wasn't surgery. This was chemistry. This was the final wake-up call. Julian stood back, his hand resting on the headboard. The tension in the room was palpable. The difference between success and catastrophic failure was measured in micrograms. I injected the fluid slowly into the IV line. I watched the monitor. The rhythmic thump-thump quickened slightly. The brain waves, once flat and monotonous, began to ripple. We stood silent, watching the numbers climb, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then, Lucas's fingers twitched. His lips parted. He coughed, a dry, rasping sound that hadn't been heard in 3 years. He tried to open his eyes. They fluttered violently against the bright light, unable to focus. Lucas, I whispered, leaning close. Can you hear me? Open your eyes. He struggled, slowly, painfully, his eyelids lifted. His eyes were blue, clear, and confused. He looked at the ceiling, then shifted his gaze to Julian, and finally, to me. He looked at my face, the strange woman in the doctor's mask. Fear flashed in his eyes. Carter, he whispered, his voice thin and raw. Carter, where is... Carter is gone. Lucas, I said quickly, reaching out and gently taking his hand. His skin was warm. The pulse was strong. He cannot hurt you. You are safe. You are at the clinic. He stared at my face. Then, the confusion faded. A light of recognition, slow but steady, dawned in his eyes. Elena, he murmured, it is you, the tremors. It is gone, I confirmed, and so is the sickness. He closed his eyes. He didn't say anything more. He was exhausted, but he was awake. The procedure was successful. The final patient was saved. 6 months later, the 50-story glass tower that once housed Sterling Medical now bore a new name etched in black titanium, Vance Sterling Medical. My office was at the top. The view over Central Park was breathtaking, but I rarely noticed it. I was sitting behind a desk made of dark, heavy wood, signing documents that controlled the future of the medical industry. The era of the corrupt, entitled CEO was over. The age of the doctor CEO had begun. The sound of a heavy door closing broke my concentration. Julian walked in. He was wearing a dark gray suit, his leg healed and his gait normal. Though he still carried the cane sometimes, he was my chief operating officer, and more. "The verdict is in," Julian said, his voice carrying the finality of the law. He placed a file on the desk. "Carter Sterling, life without parole. The kidnapping of his brother and the attempted murder of a United States senator proved difficult for even the best lawyers to argue away." And Sarah Miller. 30 years, Julian said. "She took a plea bargain to testify against Maxwell. The senator is still fighting. Of course, he will die in the appeals process." "Good," I said, signing the last document on the stack of $500 million funding grant for a global health initiative. "The tumors have been removed. The healing can begin." Julian leaned on my desk, smiling. "Lucas is giving his first press conference this afternoon. He looks great. He just signed over 51% of the combined company to you." "I told him to keep it," I sighed. "He said you earned it," Julian countered. "Besides, he wants to go back to school. He wants to study philosophy, not quarterly reports. He is truly free now. Elena, you gave him his life back." I looked at Julian. He was no longer a bodyguard or a co-conspirator. He was my partner in every sense. He understood the violence of the world, but he valued the healing. "I need to leave now," I said, standing up. "I have one more thing to do." I walked to the corner of the office, on a small black stand, under a dome of polished glass, sat my old platinum scalpel case, the case Carter had thrown into the fire. Julian had it restored and polished. I lifted the dome. I picked up the scalpel. The metal felt cold, heavy, and familiar in my hand. It was the instrument of my triumph, the symbol of the power I had kept hidden. I didn't need it for surgery anymore. I didn't need it for revenge. I held the scalpel for a long moment, feeling the steady strength in my hand. Then, I placed it back down on the velvet lining. I looked out over the skyline of New York City. The sun was setting, painting the glass buildings in gold and fire. "The hardest part of the job is not the cutting," I said, my voice strong, calm, and utterly dominant. "The hardest part is knowing when to put the knife away." I placed the glass dome back over the scalpel. I walked to the door. Julian was waiting for me. "Ready to go to the press conference, Dr. Vance?" Julian asked, his eyes gleaming. I smiled, a genuine, hard-won smile. "I am ready," I said, linking my arm with his. The war was over. The surgeon had healed herself, saved the innocent, and finally claimed her throne. The new pulse of the city belonged to her.